Chapter 1065. It was 7:06 in the evening. Zhang Xian had been sitting in the interrogation room for nearly 30 minutes. Just after 6:30, he was still in charge of the investigation team, indicating that the police officers should be calm and, for the safety of the hostages, don't act rashly. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, he was already locked in the interrogation room and asked to hand over his phone. Although no one had handcuffed him yet, Zhang Xian was already panicking. Click! Just as Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang's imagination was running wild, someone opened the door. 3 people came in, and the leader was Zhang Xian's immediate superior, Bureau Chief Zhu of this branch. Behind Commissioner Zhu were 2 young men. One of them looked handsome and well-dressed. His appearance and presence gave off an aura that did not match his age, and he gave off an aura of authority. The other one, there was no point in too many descriptions, but we could summarize him with one word: Feng Bujue. Bureau Chief Zhu. What's going on? Zhang Xian immediately stood up from the chair and looked at the bureau chief. Is there any misunderstanding? Bureau Chief Zhu looked at him expressionlessly and was silent for 2 seconds before replying. These 2 are both senior officers of the higher departments. He paused. They have a few questions for you. Just answer them truthfully. After that, Bureau Chief Zhu looked at Bao Qing again. Sir, I'll go out first. Okay. Bao Qing nodded. You've worked hard. Bureau Chief Zhu. This is... Zhang Xian wanted to stop the bureau chief, but the latter walked out without looking back, closing the door behind him. Okay, Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang, it's useless to ask anyone for help. Feng Bujue took a few steps forward and came to the table. Please sit down. Let's sit down and talk. Hearing that, Zhang Xian used a rather hostile gaze to study Feng Bujue from head to toe. Then, he huffed out a breath of air from his nose and sat down sideways. There were a total of 4 interrogation rooms in this branch, and the layout was almost the same. There was a table in the middle of a space of about 20 square meters. On the side of the table near the door, there were 2 chairs for the interrogators. On the other side of the table, there was only 1 chair for the interrogator. All the tables and chairs were fixed to the floor and could not be moved. Only 1 seat was fitted, and there were several small metal rings on the table and at the corners of the table that could be used to fasten the hinges. There were 2 incandescent lamps installed at the top of the interrogation room. There was also a table lamp on the table. The table lamp was naturally placed on the half of the table near the door. In addition, there were 2 movable surveillance cameras installed on the 2 opposite corners of the ceiling. After Zhang Xian sat down, Bao Qing walked to one of the surveillance cameras and pulled out the plug. Then he casually strolled to the other spy on the opposite side of the room. As for Feng Bujue, he just silently sat down opposite Zhang Xian and stared at Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang's face with a faint smile. His expression was like that of a chef looking at a piece of good food and thinking about how to cook it. What do you mean by this? Zhang Xian felt a chill down his spine when he was stared at by Brother Zhu. He tried his best to remain calm as he asked the question. Feng Bujue ignored his question and asked him back. At around 4:30 this afternoon, you received a call on the toilet. Before he finished his sentence, cold sweat flowed down from Zhang Xian's temples. Who was on the other end of the phone? What did they want from you? Feng Bujue asked. I don't know what you're talking about. Even though he felt a little guilty, Zhang Xian still pretended to be calm and replied. Oh, you don't know, right? Feng Bujue said as he took out a transparent evidence bag from his pocket. The bag contained Zhang Xian's phone. Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang, you're also a police officer. You should know that. Even if you delete the call records in your phone, we still have many ways to find out that call. Zhang Xian didn't speak. He just avoided Brother Zhu's gaze. Humph. Feng Bujue saw this and snorted coldly. As for me, I can probably guess what you're thinking. You think that if we found something, even if we have a recording of the phone call, we don't need to ask you anymore. Since we're questioning you now, it means that we don't have any substantial information. At most, we're just bluffing. Zhang Xian still remained silent. Oh, Feng Bujue looked at Zhang Xian's reaction and chuckled. Yes, we're indeed in a deadlock. Because the person who called you was very cautious, he used a disposable SIM card and used technical means to make a second transfer and interference of this communication. Therefore, other than the call record, nothing was left. There was no way to trace it, and there was no recording. Hearing this, Zhang Xian's lips curled into an imperceptible smile. Officers, Zhang Xian finally spoke up. Zhang Xian finally replied then. Brother Ju's last sentence had given him some reassurance. I did receive a strange phone call this afternoon, but the person on the other end of the line was just trying to sell me something. I gave him a few perfunctory replies before hanging up. As for the situation you're talking about, I'm really not sure. Oh, Brother Ju nodded. When you heard that you couldn't find anything, you changed from don't know to not sure, right? Zhang Xian didn't answer this question. He had interrogated many suspects himself. He knew better than anyone when to answer and when to remain silent. However, the next second, Feng Bujue changed the topic. The caution of the person on the other end of the phone, or rather, professionalism, proves that the person on the phone is not a normal person. Zhang Xian sneered. Brother Ju's words couldn't prove anything at all. By the way, I haven't asked. Zhang Xian didn't continue the conversation. Instead, he asked, what's your surname? Which department do you work in? That's none of your business, Bao Qing, who was standing by the table, replied coldly. Haha, I'm just asking. Zhang Xian arrogantly took out a pack of cigarettes from his jacket pocket, picked one up, and was about to light it for himself. Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang, I find that you seem to be blindly optimistic about your situation. Feng Bujue paused for a few seconds, then continued. Do you think that we can't do anything to you? Or do you think that the worst outcome would be nothing more than being skinned, usually used to describe the removal of an evil official? Sir, Zhang Xian lit a cigarette and took a puff. I've already answered the questions you asked. Do you think I've committed a heinous crime by accepting a sales call? You want to discuss crime with us? Bao Qing took out a mobile phone from his pocket and looked at the screen. Zhang Xian, how much is your annual salary? Well, Zhang Xian looked up at him and didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about whether there was a trap in this question. No matter how much it is, Bao Qing didn't wait for him to answer. Instead, he pressed a few buttons and showed an online bank transfer interface in front of Zhang Xian. It must be much less than this number, right? The moment his eyes met the screen, Zhang Xian's expression changed abruptly. You, Deputy Bureau Chief, Zhang stood up from his chair. How did you get my? You're what? Feng Bujue interrupted him. What does this account have to do with you? Or perhaps I should ask this. Brother Ju paused for half a second before continuing. Do you have anything to do with the large amount of cash in the account of this fake company that was opened under your wife's brother's name? Every time he said the word, he raised his voice a notch, as if he was reciting it through his mouth. I. Zhang Xian didn't know what to say. Deputy Bureau Chief Zhang, I said you were blindly optimistic, but you didn't agree. Feng Bujue said, who do you think we are? This was not a question, and he didn't intend to give a clear answer. We're not the kind of people who will let you go to court. His face became gloomy. We are the kind of people who will make you disappear from the earth. This is the police station. Zhang Xian immediately roared, not knowing whether it was out of anger or to embolden himself. Bang! The next second, he was punched in the face. Then, Zhang Xian staggered and sat down, looking stunned. He was stunned for a long time until he felt a chill on his philtrum. He instinctively reached out to touch it and saw his nose bleeding. Only then did he come back to his senses. You? How dare you hit me? Zhang Xian covered his nose and pointed at Feng Bujue angrily. Before he finished speaking, Feng Bujue stood up. You didn't expect this, did you? He smiled. My punch just now was mainly to broaden your thinking. It allowed you to break the mindset of, I can't be beaten by two unidentified people in the police station. He paused. With this first step, our communication can be smoother. You. Zhang Xian was shocked and angry, but he really couldn't do anything about it. If he wanted to fight back, it would not be wise for a slightly plump middle-aged man like him to fight with two young men. Okay, I'll show you what I can do with violence. Phone Bujue said, if I don't get a satisfactory response later, I can gradually upgrade to minor injury, serious injury, disability, or He spread out his hands. But is death really scary? I don't think so. Especially those criminals who are involved in corruption. Many of them are not afraid of death, because most of the money they got from their crimes can't be recovered. We often see some greedy criminals in prison when they are old, but the losses they cause to the country and the people have not been compensated. Their families are still enjoying their illegal gains overseas. As Brother Ju spoke, he came to Zhang Xian's side and leaned on the edge of the table. He continued, of course, you're not at that level yet, but the nature is similar, and the real weakness of people like you. We know it very well. Bao Qing walked to the other side of Zhang Xian, held up his phone, and said, as long as I move my finger, all the money in this account will be donated to charity. He paused for 2 seconds and added, believe me, once the operation is done, you'll never be able to get the money back. If you think money is just a worldly possession, then it's okay. Feng Bujue continued, people still need to be sentimental. Tonight, I can introduce your wife and girlfriend to each other in person, and we can have dinner and tea together. Oh, right, Bao Qing said. As far as we know, the brother-in-law who manages the company for you seems to like going to brothels. He often goes to those places, so it's inevitable that he'll meet some troublemakers. What if he's accidentally injured in a fight and his family line is cut off? That'll be such a shame. Speaking of family, I suddenly remembered. Feng Bujue continued in less than a second. Your son is preparing to go to the evil land of American imperialism next year, right? If he suddenly has a criminal record for some reason, guess, will he still be able to get a passport? It's not a matter of the passport. Bao Qing complained in a relaxed tone. In that case, whether or not he can get a high school diploma will be a problem. That's true, and he's an adult, Feng Bujue said. After he goes to prison, if people find out that he has a corrupt cop as a father, then the two of them talked back and forth, and Zhang Xian was so scared that his face turned green and purple, and he even had a nosebleed. The cigarette in Zhang Xian's hand fell to the ground, and his hand couldn't help but tremble. I'll tell you everything. Please be magnanimous. That's right. Feng Bujue patted him on the shoulder. If you had been like this earlier, I wouldn't have hit you. He was the only one who believed his own words. As long as you tell us the truth, we'll forget about the bribery. It's just 8 million yuan over 10 years. Is that a big deal? Bao Qing glared at Brother Ju, and his eyes seemed to say, you're a fake detective, Jioku, but you're really arrogant. Evening, 7:53 p.m. Feng Bujue and Bao Qing left the interrogation room and came to a lounge specially prepared for them. Xiao Tan and Brother Chan were also waiting for them in the lounge. How is it? Xiao Tan asked as soon as he saw them come in. Well, it's not that simple, Bao Qing said as he sat down. Why? Brother Chan asked. Does Deputy Bureau Chief Zheng have a powerful background? That's not it. Bao Qing frowned. He's just a small character, but if we have to make an analogy, the person who called Zhang Xian is like a chess player sitting before a game of chess. Brother Ju said, and Zhang Xian is just a pawn on the chessboard. In that person's hands, there are many other pawns like Zhang Xian. When necessary, they can be used, and when necessary, they can be discarded. Does that mean the person who kidnapped Phantom Dawn has a powerful background? Brother Chan gasped. You're wrong again. Feng Bujue smiled. The perpetrator of the kidnapping and the mastermind are both pawns. At this point, there was a flash of excitement in Brother Ju's smile. But there is another person involved in all this. He plays the role of the mastermind. In other words, he is the chess player that I mentioned earlier. He licked his lips. This person is very interesting. Chapter 1066. It was 9 p.m. sharp. There were still 3 hours until the race started. In front of a residential area in City S. Sir, all the entrances and exits to the residential area have been sealed off. We have sent people to watch the streets around the outer wall. A leading officer came to the car that Bao Qing was in and reported the situation. Okay, everyone is on standby. Wait for my order. Bao Qing nodded at the officer and waved the walkie-talkie in his hand. The officer nodded and returned to his post. Then, 2 seconds later, Bao Qing turned around and asked the person in the back seat, "What is your plan for the next step?" At that moment, Feng Bujue, Wang Tanji, and Meng Jingchan sat side by side in the back seat of the Phaeton. Bao Qing sat in the passenger seat, and the person in the driver's seat was Bao Qing's colleague, an agent from 9 subjects. "Wait." Feng Bujue only replied with one word. "Wait for what?" Before Master Bao could ask, Xiao Tan asked. "Wait for the call," Feng Bujue said as he patted his shirt pocket. In his pocket was Zhang Xian's phone. "You mean," Bao Qing said with some thought, "the mastermind will call Zhang Xian again?" "That might not be the case," Feng Bujue replied. "So I plan to wait and see." Brother Feng. Brother Chan was panicking. "Is that really a good idea? The enemy's goal is to make it so that Phantom Dawn will not be able to make it to the race before midnight. Isn't wasting time playing right into their hands?" "Huh." Brother Bujue laughed drily. "Brother Chan, you seem to have misunderstood something." Meng Jingchan heard that and asked with confusion, "What have I misunderstood?" "Indeed, the enemy's goal is to make it so that Phantom Dawn will not be able to make it to the race," Feng Bujue replied. "But to achieve that goal, there are many ways. The wasting time that you mentioned is just one of them." At this point, Meng Jingchan's expression shifted. He reacted quickly. After being reminded by Brother Bujue, he immediately understood the severity of the situation. "Looks like you've already figured it out." Feng Bujue saw the change in Brother Zen's expression, and he added, "Indeed, there are many ways to make Phantom Dawn unable to participate in the competition. There is no need to go through the trouble of kidnapping. Just find someone to break a few of his bones or give him a mild concussion." "Then, why didn't they do that?" Bao Qing asked. "Huh, of course, they have their own reasons." Feng Bujue chuckled coldly. "Based on my personal conclusion, there are 5 types of abnormal behaviors that deviate from normal logic during the course of a crime. First, it is to disrupt the investigation. Second, it is to serve the purpose of the crime. Third, it is to follow some kind of special tradition. For example, there's an old tradition among thieves to poop at the crime scene before leaving. Fourth, it is a sudden inspiration. Fifth, it is an idiot." After Brother Ju concluded, he paused for 2 seconds before adding, "Using this case as an example, I believe it is the second scenario. To serve the motive of the mastermind." Xiao Tan asked. "Yes," Feng Bujue confirmed. "Speaking of which," Brother Chan said, "I have considered this before. If Phantom Dawn is unable to participate in the race, then the direct beneficiary will be our opponent, Brahmin. In that case, could the mastermind be someone from Brahmin?" "I don't think so." Feng Bujue glanced at Brother Chan out of the corner of his eyes. "Brahmin has always been a well-behaved studio. You people in the industry should know that better than I do, right?" "That is true. But other than them," Brother Chan said, "who else can benefit from this?" "Huh." Feng Bujue laughed. "Why are you still thinking about the obvious? Think about the illegal activities." Something crossed Meng Jingchan's mind. "Oh, I get it now." Xiaodan also raised his voice. "Is it an outside bet?" "Finally, I got it right." Feng Bujue shrugged. "That is the most logical motive." Bao Qing followed his train of thought and said, "If you explain it that way, everything makes sense." He thought about it and said, "With the attention and influence of today's competition, there must be more than one outside the competition. And this mastermind of this kidnapping before us has no doubt placed a large bet on Brahmin. He has to win. I believe that the mastermind did not plan to gamble from the beginning. He was there to win." Feng Bujue continued the conversation. Since he had already decided to rely on outside tactics to decide the outcome of the competition, naturally, he would place all his bets on Brahmin, who had the highest odds. He scratched his chin and said, "Therefore, he went to find the mastermind and directed the show that he had created today. The mastermind is indeed a very clever person." Bao Qing muttered. "He planned a kidnapping, not an attack. If it was an attack, it would be a violent crime, and the police would investigate it as soon as possible. But a kidnapping is different. As long as they don't call for ransom, even if the family members report the case, it is at most a missing person case. Plus, the person who went missing is a young man, and it was less than half a day ago. Normally, it would not attract much attention. Besides, Fong Bujue said, the motive of the mastermind can be well concealed. He used his finger to point at his forehead. If what happened today was an attack, the headlines would be famous esports player attacked on the day of key competition. But now, if everything goes according to the mastermind's plan, tomorrow's headlines will be famous esports player absent from the key competition for no reason, and the player claims that he was illegally detained at the time. Then, he turned to Ming Jingchan and said, "Can you tell me what the difference is?" The former means that someone is maliciously manipulating the competition. Brother Zin thought about it for a few seconds and said, "As for the latter, it is hard to say." In conclusion, Fong Bujue continued, combined with the fact that the mastermind told Zheng Xian to delay the investigation. At least for now, their plan should still be to restrict Phantom Dawn's freedom before the competition starts. He paused. But if we do not handle this properly or push them too far, they might escalate their plan. When you say we do not handle this properly, you don't mean... Xiao Tan seemed to have thought of something, and he turned his gaze out the car window. To alert them, Fong Bujue summed up the answer in 4 words. Then, what do you mean by escalating their plan? Brother Zin asked. Isn't that obvious? Brother Zin narrowed his eyes. With one call from the mastermind, the 3 kidnappers will give Phantom Dawn a good beating. So, who do you think is faster, them or us? Now that you mention it, Meng Jingchan frowned. Let's not save this man. Brother Zen's worldview was obviously on point. The competition is small, but life is important. After all, they will release him after the competition. We should just wait here. The safety of the hostage is our top priority. That's right. Xiao Tan concurred. What if we alert them when we rush in and they decide to fight us to the death? Humph, you two are too naive. At that moment, Fong Bujue scoffed and interrupted the two. Earlier, when Zheng Xian was brought into the interrogation room, we had already alerted the enemy. There was no turning back for this matter. What? Bao Qing was startled when he heard that. Could it be that Zheng Xian has found a chance to tip them off? Xiao Tan and Brother Zen had similar reactions. Fong Bujue looked at the 3 of them and said darkly, "Ha, have you forgotten? Before this, it was Zheng Xian who received the call from the mastermind, and then he was forced to carry out the mission. Then, before that, how did the mastermind know about the progress of the investigation? How did he know that you have already reported the case, where you have reported the case, and that the police have already formed a task force?" When that was said, the expression of everyone in the car shifted. Woo! Woo! At that moment, a mobile phone vibrated, breaking the silence and stunned atmosphere. Fong Bujue picked up Zheng Xian's mobile phone, which had been taken out of the evidence bag, looked at the caller ID, and picked it up. "You finally called. I was getting impatient. Actually, I could have not called you, but..." A husky voice that had obviously been manipulated came from the other end of the phone. "I'm curious. Who are you?" "I wouldn't dare call myself a saint, but I'm more like a mad demon," Fong Bujue replied with a smile. "Ah," the voice laughed. "Okay, Mr. Fong." He then threw a question at Zhao Yu. "It seems that you want to play a game with me?" "Yes," Fong Bujue replied. "Ah," the other party sneered. "In this situation, do you really think you have a chance?" "Of course I do," Brother Zhu replied. "I'm just afraid that you don't dare to play." "Ha! Ha!" The mastermind laughed after hearing that. "You are very interesting." He stopped laughing and said, "But being interesting doesn't mean you are capable. You are also very interesting," Fong Bujue replied in a lazy tone. "I'm already looking forward to your reaction when you lose." As soon as he said that, the other end of the phone suddenly fell silent. 3 seconds later, the husky voice spoke again. "I'll give you 15 minutes to find the exact location of the target and text it to my number." He paused for half a second. "After 15 minutes, this number will be invalid. By then, if I don't receive the text, or if you send the wrong answer, then we have nothing to talk about." "Huh!" Fong Bujue chuckled and said, "Aren't you afraid that after I find the target, I will lead my men to break in and use tear gas to hold everyone back before you can give any instructions? You could try. After saying that, the mastermind hung up the phone. Chapter 1067. November 15th, 9:20 p.m. Somewhere in S City, in a shop on the street, the shutter door of the shop had been put down, but the lights in the shop were still very bright. At this time, a slightly fat, slightly balding man was sitting in front of a laptop attentively, looking at many surveillance images and moving information on the screen. On the table in front of him, there were more than 10 mobile phones scattered around, and many strange self-made devices spread out. He wore a pocket-sized Bluetooth headset on his left ear, and his hands were constantly flying on the keyboard. This person was called Dong Feng, Dong in the east, Feng in the direction of the wind. Dong Feng was naturally not the name his parents gave him, but he had stopped using his real name a long time ago. And those who came in contact with him were not interested in his real name. They only recognized Dong Feng. Dong Feng's name was very imposing, but his appearance could only be described as terrible. At least in the eyes of the secular aesthetic, he should be worthy of the word ugly. He was fat, not cute, and not obviously handsome. He was only 35 years old, but most people's first impression of him was that he was 40 years old or more. His receding hairline, greasy skin, deep dark circles under his eyes, and strange taste in clothes, all of these made this man, with a high IQ and a fortune of more than 100 million yuan, be regarded as a fool all year round. Maybe this was his personality, or maybe this was a kind of disguise he put on. In short, this man, who looked like he could not even take care of himself, was engaged in a planning work that was comparable to precision science, criminal planning. Dong Feng's business level was very high, and he controlled a very large intelligence network. This network carried the secrets that countless people did not want to know, and these people with secrets could become Dong Feng's pawns when necessary. Taking today's incident as an example, Zhang Xian was one of his pawns. Of course, now he was an abandoned pawn that had been exposed. However, among the police officers, there was still a person who tipped him off. Until 2 minutes ago, that person was still sending him real-time information through text messages. Humph! It turns out that he is just an arrogant person who bluffs. Dong Feng looked at the time on his computer and glanced at his phone. 15 minutes have passed, and the message hasn't arrived. In the end, this kid didn't even have the guts to blindly guess an address and send it over. Just as he was muttering to himself, suddenly, crack. There was a clear sound of a metal object being pried apart. In that instant, Dong Feng's expression abruptly changed because it only took him half a second to react. The thing that had been pried open was the lock of the shutter door behind him. Whoosh! When Dong Feng suddenly turned his head, the shutter door happened to be lifted. Several dazzling lights shone in from the street outside the door, accompanied by the messy sound of guns being loaded and the shouts of police. Don't move. Dong Feng's heart went from shock all the way to the bottom of the valley. 10 minutes later, Dong Feng, who was handcuffed, was escorted into a police car, and the person sitting next to him in the back seat was Feng Bujue. When the car started, Dong Feng's face was ashen. How did you know it was me? Naturally. I found out through analysis, Feng Bujue replied casually. I've been selling breakfast here for more than a month, and the shop is rented through legal channels. I haven't shown any strange behavior during this period. So how did you find out? To clarify, the place where Dong Feng was arrested was a breakfast shop that was 2 streets away from Regulations headquarters. It was the place where Phantom Dawn had bought breakfast every morning for the past month. The shop was located on the road that one had to take to get from Regulations office to the subway station. This place was not far from where Phantom Dawn was kidnapped. It was only 3 stops away by the subway, and the place that Phantom Dawn was taken to was not far from the place where he was kidnapped because the effect of the ether had a time limit. If he was taken too far away, he might wake up in the car. Therefore, in less than 20 minutes, Feng Bujue and the police arrived at the scene from the hostage location. The initial suspicion is Even though I've checked the video multiple times, I still cannot find when, where, and how the kidnappers made Phantom Dawn ingest the laxative. Feng Bujua said, "You should know that the surveillance in City S is very comprehensive. The streets, subway stations, and inside the subway. In other words, other than the toilet, most public spaces can be monitored. Therefore, from the moment Phantom Dawn left Regulation's office to the moment he showed symptoms of abdominal pain on the subway, the whole process was under surveillance. Even though the surveillance was not very detailed, the things that he ate or drank or whether he was poked with a needle could be confirmed. Just because of that, you suspect me?" Dongfeng asked. "After eliminating all the impossible possibilities, it is only natural that I suspect you," Feng Bujua said. "Other than the breakfast that he bought from you, Phantom Dawn did not eat anything this morning. He did not even take a sip of water. And from the video, before he finished the breakfast, the only people who came into contact with the food were you and him." He paused. "You're the only one running the breakfast shop, so the only person who would be able to place the laxative into a specific person's food is you. Can't he just have a stomachache?" Dongfeng asked. "Huh. If this was any other day, his death might have been an accident," Feng Bujua said. "But today, there's no doubt that there was a drug involved." He crossed his arms before his chest and continued. "This morning, your 3 executors put on the cleaning outfits that they had prepared beforehand and followed Phantom Dawn into the subway. Then, Phantom Dawn got off the subway and entered the toilet. The 3 of them followed him. They removed their jackets and found a spot where there were fewer people in the toilet. They hung a cleaning and maintenance sign on the door and guarded the door. Just like that, it did not take long for Phantom Dawn to be the only one left in the toilet. Normally, there are 2 toilets in a subway station, and everyone is in a hurry in the morning. Many people would choose to go back to their workplace to deal with it. So, they temporarily sealed off a toilet for 20 minutes, and it would not cause too much of an impact. Just like that, about 20 minutes later, they took down Phantom Dawn, who came out from the cubicle, and dragged him out of the station into a van that they had prepared beforehand." Feng Bujua paused for a moment before continuing. "This seemingly simple plan has 2 difficulties. 1, Phantom Dawn is, after all, a young man. It is hard to tell what will happen when he is taken down, so the place has to be a private place where there is no surveillance. 2, after the target is taken down, they have to bring him to the van as soon as possible, or else, if they stay in a public place for too long, it will raise suspicion." When Dongfeng heard that, he understood the real point of Brother Ju's explanation, and he could not help but mumble, "So, that's how it is. Looks like you've thought of that as well." Feng Bujua saw the change in Dongfeng's heart from his reaction, so he added, "You're right. Only the person who used the laxative can solve these 2 problems." He looked at Dongfeng and said, "By controlling the type and dosage of the laxative, we can predict which stations Phantom Dawn will get off at. That way, we can prepare the van at those stations. Other than that, we can ensure that he will go to the toilet, and after that, his legs will go weak. Even if that's the case, I'm probably just a normal merchant who has been bribed," Dongfeng said. "Your top priority should be to rescue the hostages, and for someone like me, it shouldn't be too late to deal with them after the incident is over, right?" He asked with suspicion, "But why would you?" "Indeed, initially, I also thought you were someone who had been bribed by the mastermind," Feng Bujua said. "But I have a habit of deduction. When I'm investigating a case, I like to get to the bottom of the details. After all, I can use the resources at the police station freely, so I decided to investigate this breakfast shop of yours. And I found out that your shop opened on the 11th of October, which was the day after the 36th day of the tournament for the best S2 preliminaries." Feng Bujua paused for 2 seconds before continuing. "This coincidence at that time made me realize something. I continued my investigation, and, as I expected, I found many strange things." He used his eyes to look out the car window. "This is a business district, and there are many office buildings. The shops around here are either mid to high-end brands or large shopping malls. Before you rented the shop, it was always empty. The reason was that the shop was too small and the rent was too high. You couldn't do big business, and if you did small business, you'd definitely lose money. Oomph. You're wrong about that. Dong Feng snorted. I've been doing this for more than a month, and I've actually made a small profit. Then I really have to congratulate you. Feng Bujua laughed. But that's not the point. The point is, in summary, your shop, and you are all very suspicious. After further investigation, I noticed that your identity was a fake. This is what I don't understand the most. Dong Feng stared at Brother Bujue's face. I'm not afraid to tell you that when I first entered the industry, I specialized in creating fake identities. All the identity documents I use now are extremely difficult to identify in any country in the world. He changed the topic, and his eyes sharpened. But you can tell that they are fake. Yes, I looked at your electronic file, and I could tell from reading the part where you were in junior high, Feng Bujue said. That's impossible, Dong Feng said firmly. The details of the identity documents I wrote were very accurate. Even the school's results and records of rewards and punishments were. It's because it was too detailed that it revealed a flaw, Feng Bujue interrupted. What? Dong Feng was shocked, and his eyes flickered. It was written in the file that you won the third prize in the 2035 City Junior High School Essay Competition, Brother Bujue continued. So what? Dong Feng asked. That's right. That doesn't mean anything. In a forged identity document, all kinds of details are only recorded to make the identity seem more real. Awards like this, which have been around for so many years and are neither too big nor too small, are basically things that can't be verified. That year, there were 3 people who won the third prize in the City Junior High School Essay Competition. All of them were girls. And by the way, they were all squadron leaders, Feng Bujue replied. You can't be a transsexual, right? Huh? Dong Feng was stunned. How did you know? At that moment, Dong Feng thought to himself, you were still wearing diapers in 2035, weren't you? Are you trying to scare me? I knew you would ask that. Feng Bujue said as he took out his phone. He clicked open a web page and showed it to Dong Feng. Take a look for yourself. Dong Feng took a closer look, and the phone showed a shopping page for an item. The item on it was a physical book, and the title was The Best Works of the City Junior High School Essay Competition. There is such a publication in this world. Dong Feng could not believe his eyes. Yes, this publication was written by me, Feng Bujue replied. When Dong Feng heard that, he almost fainted. Speaking of which, I almost forgot, you're a novelist. Naturally, Dong Feng recognized his brother Bujue. As someone who was familiar with Thriller Paradise, it was impossible for him not to recognize the man. However, when they were on the phone, Dong Feng did not realize that the person on the other end of the phone was Feng Bujue. It was not until he was arrested that he realized that. Yes, a few years ago, I took a month out of my time to read all the winning essays since the competition's inception. I commented and criticized them all. Then, from my lackeys at the education department, I found out the family background of all the winners and the shady business behind the award. In the end, I came up with that realistic satire. Feng Bujue's words were filled with shamelessness and dark information. Therefore, I am 100% certain that there is no such person as you among the winners. The fact that you can remember the name and year of each winner in that kind of book aside, Dong Feng said, isn't it a bit too presumptuous to conclude that my entire identity is fake based on that one mistake? Perhaps I just wrote it down to make my resume look better. Your fake identity has been a freelancer since high school. There is no record of an internship at all. Let me ask you this. Who are you trying to show your resume to when you're selling breakfast? Feng Bujue asked. Furthermore, is this kind of award really going to make one's resume look better? Wouldn't it be more believable if you came up with a sports or science award? I really did not expect this. East Wind's expression was very depressed. He was a very capable person, but Feng Bujue had caused him to feel both mentally and physically defeated. At that moment, Dong Feng could not help but try to remember if there were any similar flaws in his other fake identities. Okay, the profit and loss of the store, the exposure of your identity. It doesn't make sense to dwell on it now. Feng Bujue, on the other hand, brought the topic back on track. After all, from the very beginning, you didn't come here to earn early money. Even if you lose several 100,000 RMB in this month, plus the few hours of labor that you have to work every morning, it won't matter, right? He licked his lips and continued. The real value of this store is that it can provide you with a near-perfect stronghold in a place very close to the headquarters of the order. Other than those few hours every morning, you can move around freely in the store for the rest of the day. Oh, Brother Jew chuckled. For someone with professional knowledge and excellent skills like you, it shouldn't be difficult for you to physically invade all the network users in a certain area through the store circuit box, right? Oomph. Dong Feng immediately snorted again. It's not as simple as you say, he tacitly agreed. The office building of the order is undoubtedly your main target. Feng Bujue continued. You know very well the value of a highly watched game like the tournament for the best S2 in the gambling circle. So you've been here for a long time, ready to change the outcome of a certain game at any time. He raised a finger. As long as there's a deal, like today's deal, it'll be a huge profit for you. He spread his hands and smiled. Even if you don't receive any related commissions during this period, it's still good to hack the networks of the big companies nearby and get some information. Trade secrets, personal privacy, these things can be turned into money and power in your hands. As Feng Bujue spoke, he took out a cell phone from his pocket. This was not Zheng Xian's cell phone, but someone else's. This power can drive many people to do things for you. Brother Bujue laughed. For example, the owner of this cell phone. As he spoke, he took out another cell phone. This one was Zheng Xian's. And the owner of this cell phone, I see. At this moment, thoughts flashed through Dong Feng's mind. He said in a low voice, You knew from the beginning that other than Zheng Xian, I had other spies in the police station. That's right. Feng Bujue said, When I learned that Deputy Bureau Chief Zheng received the phone call and acted, I deduced this point. So, the conversation you had with me earlier was a trap. Dong Feng said with some regret. TSK, I should have thought of it earlier. What nonsense, like, after finding the target, you led your men to break in, and before I could give any orders, you used a burst of tear gas to hold everyone back. This kind of nonsense is a classic trick. Your reaction is quite fast. Feng Bujue laughed. But compared to me, after all, you're still half a beat slower. You found out Zheng Xian, but you couldn't determine who the other spy was. Dong Feng said, while thinking. So, you pretended not to know and mobilized as many police forces as possible to surround the community where the hostages were. You know, under such circumstances, my spies would definitely follow the main force and find opportunities to pass on information to me. I just catered to your plan. Feng Bujue said, when you learned that the police had set up a task force, you could immediately speculate. Once the police launched a comprehensive investigation, they would be able to determine which community the hostages were finally in through the street surveillance. He touched his chin and continued. Of course, the place you chose was very good. It was a building that had not yet been fully developed, and there were many empty houses that had not yet been sold. The internal surveillance of the community was not fully implemented, so the police would not know the exact location of the hostages in a short time. Speaking of this, Brother Bujue shook Zheng Xian's mobile phone. So, you immediately used Deputy Bureau Chief Zheng as a pawn. He tilted his head and smiled. But you didn't expect. Not long after, your other spy sent a message saying that Zheng Xian was detained by 2 agents from an unknown department. Detaining Zheng Xian. Was that also a deliberate act for me to see? Dong Feng asked. Yes. Feng Bujue said, I knew that your other spy would tell you about this situation, and this foreshadowed the call between us. How did you know that I would definitely make that call? Dong Feng asked. I didn't know. Feng Bujue replied in a joking tone. So, I led the team to surround the community to see if you could keep your cool. Damn it. Dong Feng could not refute this mockery. When the call came, I was relieved. Feng Bujue continued. Your patience was not as good as I expected. He smiled. You pretended to be calm and said something about playing a game, but in fact, you wanted to test and induce my actions. You wanted to create an opportunity for your 3 pawns to escape from that area. So, you used this in turn to induce me. Dong Feng said in a low voice. In that 15 minutes, you didn't look for the hostage at all. Instead, you were looking for the spy. Very good, you got it right. Feng Bujia snapped his fingers and replied. The content of the call was fine. It didn't matter if you mentioned 15 minutes or not. Even if you said 5 minutes or 3 minutes, it didn't matter. As long as I conveyed what I wanted to say, I could conclude that you would do 3 things after hanging up the phone. Brother Bujia stretched out 3 fingers and smiled. First, come up with a plan for the next step. Second, make a phone call to the 3 executioners and briefly inform them of several modes of action. Third, contact your spy through text messages or phone calls and ask him to cooperate. And you, Dong Feng continued. After hanging up the phone, you immediately took control of the police officers' mobile phones. Feng Bujia shrugged and responded to the question silently with a despicable expression. After that, the police's actions were completely out of your sight. I could do whatever I wanted. He picked up the spy's mobile phone again and showed it a few times proudly. I only needed a everything is normal text message to keep you in the dark and waiting for your doom. After you left my surveillance, you rushed over at full speed to arrest me. Dong Feng muttered. Didn't you think about, what if I wasn't in the shop and you didn't find anything? Of course, I asked someone to watch the surveillance footage for the whole day. After making sure that you didn't leave the shop, Brother Bujia had already arranged this work before the two of you talked. Feng Bujia said, of course. I can't rule out the possibility that you dug an emergency escape tunnel in the shop. He pursed his lips non-committally. So, when I came to arrest you, as for the hostages, I also prepared several countermeasures according to the confession of your spy. The escape plans you planned. Even if they implemented them, the result would be them walking right into the trap. Feng Bujia crossed his legs and continued. Not to mention, you and all your equipment are now in our hands. Since you always use a voice changer to communicate with the pawns, it's not difficult to impersonate you to give orders to the executors. Later, we can ask someone to impersonate you to make a call and ask them to release the hostages. Okay, Dong Feng's tone seemed to be relieved. Good plan. You have room to retreat. He shook his head. I'm sincerely convinced. Well said, well said. Feng Bujia made a fist salute. Your Excellency is not bad either. But, Dong Feng said, you should also understand. For someone like me, even if I lost today, I won't stay in prison for too long. I'll regain my freedom soon. At this time, he actually smiled. If you want to talk about the reason, it's because I have the power you mentioned. What? Are you threatening me? Feng Bujia replied indifferently. What do you think? Dong Feng asked with a smile. Before Brother Ju could respond, he continued. Feng Bujia, to be honest, I admire your talent. But in the end, you're just an ordinary person. The other world I live in is something you can't understand at all. If I want to take revenge on you, it's as easy as pie. He looked at Brother Ju confidently, and the defeated look on his face was gone. I won't hide it from you. Today's incident has caused me a huge loss. If you were me, what would you do? Dong Feng thought that his words would scare Feng Bujia and make him give in immediately. Unexpectedly, ha ha. Feng Bujia's face quickly revealed an evil smile that made Dong Feng's hair stand on end. If I were you, facing someone like Feng Bujia, I would be extra careful. I won't easily say something like that, because if I make him feel threatened in the slightest, he will do something crazy that I can't even imagine. Brother Ju said and pointed outside the car window. Speaking of which, I don't know if you noticed, but the place you're going now is not the police station. As soon as he said this, Dong Feng's expression changed. The two driving are not police officers either. Feng Bujia pointed at Detective Jioku and Bao Qing in the driver's seat and the passenger's seat respectively. At this time, Dong Feng also noticed that the two driving were dressed in black and were not wearing police uniforms. You are. In a few seconds, Dong Feng became the one who was afraid. Regarding the other world that you mentioned, I do have some understanding of it. Feng Bujia did not finish. When your spy told me that the people on the street all refer to you as Dong Feng, it occurred to me, if I'm not mistaken, you used to be the gambling supervisor at Gambling Emperor Zhai, right? Dong Feng was shocked. You know about gambling Emperor Casino? I know a lot more than you think. Feng Bujue said, for example, less than a minute after getting in the car, you were already unhandcuffed, but you pretended to be handcuffed. When Dong Feng heard this, he became more and more nervous, and cold sweat rolled down his face. You used to be a gambling supervisor, which means you should have some skills. Bao Qing, who was sitting in the passenger's seat, finally spoke. But I advise you not to have any violent thoughts. I can tell you clearly, even if it's a one-on-one fight, none of the 3 people in this car will lose to you. You, Dong Feng began to tremble. He could not help but tremble due to fear. You are Joker, right? So you know about it too. Feng Bujue continued. That saves me a lot of talking. I didn't expect. Dong Feng turned to look at his brother Ju. You, a novelist, are also from Jioka? If I told you the section chief is my grandfather, would you believe me? Feng Bujue replied casually. When Dong Feng heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched a few times, and he slumped into the seat. 2 seconds later, Dong Feng turned his head and looked out the window with a hopeless expression. If I don't die this time, I'll change my profession to selling breakfast. Chapter 1068. November 15th, 9:40 a.m. Ma Junxiao, the professional player Phantom Dawn, was successfully rescued by the police. Technically, he was rescued, but in reality, he was released. Not long after Dong Feng was captured, the 3 kidnappers received a phone order to release the hostage. Even though they hesitated, they obeyed. Several minutes later, Phantom Dawn, who left the building, was quickly surrounded by the police officers who were hiding in the dark. At 10:15 p.m., after reuniting with his family, Phantom Dawn went to the hospital for a simple checkup. Then, with his own will, he followed Brother Zin back to the unit to prepare for the competition. On the other hand, the 3 executors who kidnapped Phantom Dawn carried out the retreat plan at 10 p.m. sharp, but they were arrested the moment they stepped out the door. Without a hostage, it was easy for the police to apprehend them. It was not until they were escorted into the police car that the 3 realized that the last few orders did not appear to have come from the mastermind himself. Unfortunately, they realized it too late. With the order from Jioku, the police listed the 3 executors as the main suspects, and the case ended there. Deputy Commissioner Zheng and the other undercover agent were sent to prison not long after that. Their hands were dirty to begin with, and that was why they were threatened by Dong Feng. After that, the 2 of them were dealt with as well. Dong Feng, on the other hand, had fallen into the hands of Jioku. Even Feng Bujue had no idea what would happen to the man. In any case, Brother Ju did not follow Bao Qing to the headquarters. After he confirmed that Phantom Dawn had been saved, he had Xiao Tin drive him home. That night, the handsome doctor had driven a luxury car to be his friend's chauffeur. Looking at the whole incident, the only secret that had not been revealed was the mastermind, the identity of the person who had hired Dong Feng. Of course, who that person was not important. After Dong Feng entered Jioku, he would definitely reveal the identity of his employer. Even if he really had professional integrity and didn't say anything with our Chief Gu's abilities, let me explain. When Guchen was young, he was mainly a doctor, a ghost hunter, and a detective. He would be able to find out the mastermind's identity just by using inference. Possessing huge assets, being able to participate in huge amounts of illegal gambling, being able to contact a criminal consultant like Dong Feng. It was not difficult to find people who fit these characteristics. Feng Bujue knew that very well, so he did not try to dig deeper into the clue of the mastermind. He merely saved Phantom Dawn and then returned home, hiding his achievement and fame. November 16th, midnight. The final semi-final match of the tournament for the best S2 had finally begun after a delay of almost 20 hours. Under the request of Phantom Dawn and his family, Regulation did not release any information about the kidnapping that day. In the eyes of the audience, everything was normal. They were just waiting for an exciting match. However, no one expected that the final result of this match would be forfeit. When Feng Bujue and his teammates saw this announcement in the conference room, they said the same thing in unison. Who would have thought that the battle between Regulation and Brahmin would end so abruptly with the Brahmin gods forfeiting. No way. That doesn't make sense, Hua Jian said with confusion when he saw the news. Could it be that today's kidnapping really has something to do with them? Xiaotan turned to his brother Zhu and said, when they realized Phantom Dawn was unharmed, they felt guilty and directly forfeited. No, Shilong is not that kind of person, Feng Bujue said firmly. Shilong was Shiva's real name in real life. In the game, he used the name of a Hindu god, and in real life, he had a rather famous name as well. Even though I'm not that close to him, I can see that the man is not a bad person. Brother Zhu raised his eyes to look at Xiaotan. Speaking of which, he is also a rich heir. Hey, why do you keep looking my way whenever we talk about rich heirs? Xiaotan could not help but complain. Fine, Feng Bujue said as he turned to look at the three beauties in the team. He is also a rich heir. Before he finished, the snacks in their hands flew out at the same time and covered Brother Zhu's face. Okay. Brother Zhu wiped his face and said, he is similar to Jin Fugue, also a rich heir. Then, he turned to look at his teammates' reaction. Using a Toby as an example, they did not seem to have any objections. Therefore, Feng Bujue continued. As we all know, there are different levels of rich heirs. For example, your families are similar to the royal family of an Arabian country. Jin Fugue's family, including real estate, is worth more than 100 million, but compared to the rest of you, he is much weaker. He paused, and Shilong's family is at least 10 times richer than Jin Fugue's family. Therefore, even though they are both in their 20s, relying on their family's financial support to start their own business. Jin Fugue could only start from a small gaming studio, while Shilong started from a large company. Brother Zhu said as he took a sip from the drink on the table. By the way, I think in terms of operating ability in real life, in at most 2 years, Jin Fugue will be able to catch up to Shilong. Obviously, the latter is more suitable to be a professional player. In terms of operating, Shilong is basically a hands-off boss. In the past few years, after the establishment of the gods, the daily affairs of the studio were taken care of by others. I think this is also the reason why Ragnarok has always been suppressed by order. Fundamentally speaking, Shilong is not a businessman. He usually looks at problems from the perspective of a player or a party leader, not from the perspective of a capitalist or an operator. Even though from a certain perspective, this approach has its advantages, in the long run, it is not beneficial to the company's profit and development. All right, let's stop digressing. Hua Jian saw Brother Zhu's interest in the topic, so he quickly brought it back. Tell me why you don't think he would plan the kidnapping. It's very simple, Feng Bujue replied. The motive doesn't make sense. Based on normal logic, he has the most motive, doesn't he? Xiaotan asked. No, Xiaoling interrupted with some thought. It looks that way, but the reality is the complete opposite. That's right. Feng Bujue nodded. Everyone is focused on the result of the competition, but they have neglected the meaning of the competition. At this point, Hua Jian's eyes turned, and realization dawned. That's right. Shiva is not only focused on the result, but more importantly, the process. You're right. Brother Zhu snapped his fingers. Ever since Thriller Paradise was released, the ID Phantom Dawn has always been the strongest. Be it the official ranking, the player's ranking, or the various media reports, he is publicly acknowledged as the strongest player in the game. Originally, Order's Drunken Man might not have been stronger than the 4 Heavenly Kings, but because of Phantom Dawn, the 4 Heavenly Kings have been suppressed in terms of combat ability, the thing that they are most proud of. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing. And to change that, there is only one way, and that is to defeat Phantom Dawn's team in the competition to prove Brahmin's strength. Understood. Roy Yu followed Brother Zhu's train of thought and said, for Shiva, this competition with Regulation might be more important than the finals. He does not wish for Phantom Dawn to be eliminated because he needs to defeat a team with Phantom Dawn in it to prove Brahmin's point. In other words, defeating a team without Phantom Dawn to enter the finals is meaningless. That's right, Hua Jian added. If regulation loses today because Phantom Dawn is absent, the people's opinion of Phantom Dawn will not drop. If anything, it will increase. Therefore, Sherlong has no reason to do that. Feng Bujue continued. Other than that, the motive that we discussed earlier, kidnapping the opponent's main player to advance to the finals, is just the surface motive that everyone can see. The real motive is like what I told you earlier. Naturally, Brother Ju has already told his teammates about what happened that morning. It should be related to the gambling outside. He spread out his hands. And that is even more unlikely to have anything to do with Sherlong. Not to mention that his family doesn't lack money, and the money he earns is legal. Sherlong's character is also the type who would never gamble. I have fought him more than once. His steady fighting style is similar to Blade's army destroyer. He is the kind of person who is very rational. This kind of person is mentally strong and proud. Wishful thinking or gambler's mentality is a bad habit of the weak in their eyes. They're not good at scheming and trying their luck. They're the kind of people who like to use their strength to convince the other side of their loss. And the mastermind, Hua Jian, followed up Brother Ju's words. Is he just a dirty gambler? Huh. Feng Bujue chuckled coldly. The man does not deserve the term gambler, and the term dirty is not accurate, but I get what you mean. He shrugged. No matter what, Sherlong has nothing to do with today's kidnapping. He probably has no idea what happened this morning. Brother Ju lifted his head to look at the ceiling, and his face fell into contemplation. There has to be another reason why the Brahma gods suddenly gave up. It was 3:20 a.m. on the 16th. After being bombarded with messages, emails, and phone calls for hours, the tired Sherlong finally returned home. About 3 months ago, Sherlong and his fiancée had their wedding. However, they had been living together for a few years. Their home was a villa in S City. There were very few villas in the city, but there were still some. Of course, the price was very, very expensive. The villa was not far from the Brahma God's headquarters. It was only a 10-minute drive. Sherlong's wife worked in his company as his assistant. The two of them went in and out together every day, and they were very loving. However, tonight, after Sherlong drove his wife home, he let her go back to her room to rest. As for Sherlong, he went to his study, locked the door, sat behind a desk, and fell into deep thought. His wife did not disturb him. She knew that at this moment, she did not need to ask or say anything. This was a moment when a man needed to be quiet. However, he was afraid that he would not get what he wanted. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After the sound of metal rollers rubbing against each other, half of the wall of bookshelves behind Sherlong moved horizontally. A man walked out from the bookshelf. When Sherlong heard the sound, his expression changed abruptly. He turned his head abruptly and saw Feng Bujue? Sherlong was shocked. Why are you in my house? He paused for half a second and said, How did you get into the fallout shelter? I want to talk to you, but I think you should be very busy tonight. Feng Bujue walked out with a smile and sat down on the sofa beside the desk. And some things are more convenient to talk about in person, so I came here directly. I'm not asking you why you're here. Sherlong's expression was still not very friendly. Of course, this was human nature. Even if it was your good friend who sneaked into your house without your knowledge, you would also be shocked and angry, not to mention that they were not very close friends. I'm asking you how you got in. Oh, that. Feng Bujue replied with a lazy look. Your anti-theft system hasn't been upgraded since you bought this villa, right? Although it's more than enough to guard against ordinary thieves, it's like a piece of paper window when it comes to an expert. As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his pocket. Here, this is my invasion route. I drew it out when I was waiting for you in the fallout shelter. The method of invasion is marked on the side, and I've also attached some guidance for the anti-theft system. Take some time to show it to the security company and ask them to help you upgrade the system. I promise after it's done, other than agents like Ethan Hunt, no one else will be able to get in. Sherlong looked at his brother Bujue with a blank expression. He was speechless, but in his heart, there were thousands of alpacas galloping through his mind. After standing there for a few seconds, Sherlong took the piece of paper, glanced at it, then carefully folded it and put in the desk drawer. Oh, by the way, I found the fallout shelter by accident. After Fong Bujua handed over the note, he placed his hands behind his head and leaned back on the sofa. He used a casual tone to continue the conversation. Initially, I planned to wait for you in the study, but when I was sneaking in through observation, I noticed something strange about the structure of the villa, so I started to look around. Brother Fong, Shilong was not in the mood to listen to his nonsense. He interrupted Brother Ju and said, I'm not in the mood to chat with you right now. I don't care if you're a novelist or a hidden international thief. At this moment, I just want you to leave my house. When he said this, his expression was very serious. I won't say anything unpleasant. I just want to say, please leave, or I'll call the police. Call the police. Hearing that, Fong Bujua did not show any sign of getting up from the sofa. He revealed a meaningful smile and replied, You and I both know that the things that you have encountered, the police will not be able to help you solve them. Chapter 1069. On the morning of November 16th, with Brahman's forfeit, the semi-finals of tournament for the best S2 came to an end. No one would have thought that the semi-finals that had been delayed for so long, the final showdown that everyone had been waiting for, would end in such a manner. The reason why Brahman team won forfeited was only known by the captain, Shilong, or Shiva himself. Even his 4 teammates did not know the reason. Speaking of which, the 4 had no choice. They had a contract with Brahman, so naturally, they had to follow the studio's arrangements. Shilong was the captain of the team and the boss of the studio. Since he said that he would forfeit, then his teammates had no choice. On the other hand, Regulation was also quite shocked by this situation. There was no doubt that the management was pleasantly surprised, but the team members were shocked and suspicious. Drunken Life and Dreaming were old acquaintances with Brahman's 4 heavenly kings. Because of that, they were even more confused by this forfeit incident. However, they were temporarily unable to contact Shiva himself, because within 15 minutes of this news being announced, Brahman's official website and customer service system exploded. Shiva himself quickly logged out of the game and rejected all interviews. He did not even answer questions from the company. That night, he only said a few simple words to the general manager of the studio and then returned home with his wife. After that, Fong Bujua came to meet him uninvited to discuss some things. The details of their discussion will not be revealed here. Let's move on to the next day. At 2 p.m. the next day, Shilong, as the boss of Brahman, held a press conference regarding this forfeit incident. He took out a draft and read it out. He gave a rather strange but irrefutable reason. Due to physical reasons, I was unable to participate in the competition last night. With the agreement of my teammates, the whole team forfeited. To be honest, no one would believe this excuse. But it was pointless to not believe it. After all, if Shilong said that it was due to physical reasons, then it was due to physical reasons. As for what kind of physical reason it was, sorry, that was personal privacy. If he wanted to get any information from his teammates, it would be a waste of time. Vishnu, Brahma, and Yama had been friends with Shilong for many years. They wouldn't talk nonsense, be it in public or private. And Ajura was Shilong's cousin, so it was even more impossible for them to talk nonsense. If all the parties involved had the same opinion, then there would be no breakthrough in this matter. At the end of the day, this was a forfeit, not cheating. Could it be that you don't allow others to feel uncomfortable? Couldn't Boss sure be on his period? In short, the matter of him forfeiting was forcefully explained away by Shilong. Of course, the reporters wouldn't accept everything he said. Everyone thought that there must be a story behind the god's abstention this time, and the impact of this incident would continue to ferment for a period of time. As a result, as soon as the press conference ended, irresponsible gossip, such as cowardice, peripheral gambling, and shady deals had already been brewing in the minds of the unscrupulous media people. However, most of these people's articles did not get published in the end because, at 4 p.m. on November 16th, not long after the God's press conference ended, the Dream Company silently released an announcement that shocked the media. The finals of this year's tournament for the best S2 are restricted to in-game players. What kind of concept was that? Based on the FAQ at the bottom of the announcement did not say that the finals would not be broadcasted to the public, but there was not even a recording of the finals. To be more specific, only players who entered Thriller Paradise through the gaming hub in sleeping mode, and they had to create their character before midnight on November 16th, 2055, would be able to watch the competition. Those who did not fulfill the above criteria would be forced to disconnect from the game during the finals. Other online streaming platforms will be shut down. Furthermore, the recording of the finals would not be broadcasted after the event. From the perspective of a businessman, what the Dream Company was doing was no different from Madman. First of all, based on the amount of attention that Tournament of the Best S2 received, the advertising revenue before the finals was already over 100 million yuan. But they were not going to live stream it. Secondly, it was fine if they did not live stream it. That way, they could release the recording of the competition and make more money. But they did not even want to keep the recording. Other than that, to shut out viewers other than existing players, that was even more unreasonable. If the first announcement did not add the restriction of creating a character before November 16th, 2055, it could still be seen as a marketing campaign. To put it bluntly, they were forcing people to play their game. Gaming hubs were not a problem. Even if they did not buy one, they could use it at an internet cafe. But the Dream Company had set a time limit. Even if one went to the game to create a character after seeing the announcement, it would be pointless. This kind of method would definitely make those who were interested in the game but had not joined the game unhappy. In conclusion, this decision by the Dream Company was indeed strange. Other than losing a lot of money and potential players, there was no redeeming value to it. But if one thought about it carefully, no matter what the motive was, their actions had been foreshadowed. Before the preliminaries ended, the Dream Company had already prepared for this step when they first sold the broadcasting rights to the public. Therefore, their broadcasting rights were sold in stages. That way, when the finals came, they could suddenly announce that they were not selling the broadcasting rights at this stage. In addition, below the above important news, there was another announcement that had nothing to do with most players. Explanation of the prizes that have not been released in the preliminaries. This announcement mentioned that there were only 2 prizes that had not been released in the preliminaries. One was the limited edition t-shirt, and the other was the 48 hours of qualification to experience the new version. The other prizes in the preliminaries, including game coins, experience, equipment, and so on, had been released before the semifinals. Only the above 2 prizes had not been released. This time, the officials had clearly stated the release time and method. First, the t-shirt would be sent out today. Second, the limited experience function will be activated 1 week after the finals. Then what about the date of the finals? The third announcement was the finals of Tournament for the Best S2, Ragnarok, will be held at midnight on November 19th. Chapter 1070. Even though the Dream Company's announcement had caused quite a stir, as the developer and operator of the game, they had the right to do that. No matter how many people expressed their dissatisfaction about not being able to see the finals, they could not change the result. 2.5 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the day of the finals arrived. November 18th, 11:40 p.m. As midnight approached, the number of online players in Thriller Paradise broke the record. It was the highest since the game was launched. Basically, everyone who had created a game account in Thriller Paradise had entered the gaming hub early that night and set the time to log in to sleep mode. Many people who worked the night shift even asked for leave to log into the game that night because the finals of S2 would not be replayed. At the same time, in the chairman's office at the Dream Company's headquarters, 3 men in black suits stood before the floor-to-ceiling window. They each held a wine glass and looked down at the night view of City S. The wine cups in their hands were filled with a red, fishy, and somewhat viscous liquid. No matter what it was definitely not red wine. It's about to start. Woody chuckled. Vincent, who stood on his left, said, "The trap set up by the council is not very precise, but it can be said to be unscrupulous." "Sir," Sid added, "how come I feel like they can't come up with a clever plan, so they can only resort to this kind of big move?" "Ha! Don't be so blunt." Vincent smiled. Woody used a tone that was filled with malice. Perhaps the Scorched Earth Council is not that clever in certain aspects, but their power and position are reliable. Vincent shrugged and turned to glance at Woody. Reliable on the premise that they have absolute power when it comes to power. Speaking of power, at that moment, Woody seemed to be reminded of something. That duo Ma was revived in the main universe not long ago, right? Oh, that god of eternal life, Sid said. Sid continued, I've already observed it. Frankly speaking, it's pitifully weak now. He shook his head. Compared to half a century ago when he first appeared in our universe, the current duo Ma has lost at least half of his power. He won't be able to recover to his peak, even in a plane like the main universe, which is full of energy. As expected, Vincent laughed. Back then, Duo Ma's primordial spirit was severely injured by the primordial water divine sword and was on the verge of disappearing. It's already not easy for him to leave behind a wisp of his divine consciousness to escape into another plane. All these years, he has neither the support of the true God Tesseract, nor has he obtained any power of faith. Furthermore, he has been sealed in a low magic area like the Bunny Planet. It would be abnormal if he could really recover his original strength. Hearing this, Woody laughed again. However, with the strength of the various forces in this twilight of the gods, if Duo Ma were to participate, he would definitely become a competent shit-stirrer. Just as he finished speaking, another person appeared in the office. Vincent, Woody, and Sid all turned their heads at the same time to look at the figure. Why is it that every time I teleport near you, as long as you speak, the first sentence that enters my ears is always some kind of vulgar language? Simon looked at his three old friends and greeted them with a sarcastic remark. Woody did not answer this question because it was not really a question. He smiled and continued. Lord Judge, you should be very busy tonight. How come you have the time to come over to our place? I'm here to inform you of something, Simon replied. Oh, Vincent was very sharp and immediately continued. Could it be that the council has come up with some rotten idea again? I won't comment on whether it's rotten or not, but it's good news for all of you, Simon replied. The council has said that tonight, those who place bets can enter the main universe to watch the competition. He paused for half a second and then changed the topic, but they are not allowed to interfere. Huh? Sid was stunned. Mr. Simon, such an important thing. You're only informing us now? It's just to inform us not long before the competition, in case some people, Simon said, and coldly glanced at Vincent and Woody, make some bad plans in advance. T-Sich, the two of them turned their faces away, showing a reaction that was 30% disdainful and 70% guilty. I know, no matter what, when you heard what I said just now, you've already started a plan, Simon said. So, I'll remind you again. His arrogant expression turned serious. Considering that the referee's workload tonight will be very heavy, the council has sent me some helpers. Some? Vincent's first reaction was to test the number of people. Helpers? Woody wanted to ask about the other party's background. They're all from the Titan race, so I can't reveal the number of people. Simon naturally understood what they meant, and he calmly replied, At this moment, they're like me, passing the news to the various bets. A group of Titans has been mobilized. Vincent said thoughtfully, That's interesting. If that's the case, Woody laughed evilly. No one can mess around anymore. Just based on the attitude of the two of you, I'll personally come and take care of you later, Simon added. There's no need to be so hostile. Sid looked at the three seniors and shrugged. It's just a matter of 1 minute. November 19th, midnight, Game World. The four teams that made it to the finals were Underworld Frontline, Trash Alliance, Order, and Warring States. All of them were present and ready to go. Due to the limitation of the Dream Company, during the finals of the tournament for the best S2, other than the competition mode, all the other scenario modes would be shut down. Therefore, at that moment, other than the 20 members from the four teams, no one else could queue. In other words, all the other players were gathered in the login lobby, meeting room, or market, waiting to watch the live stream. When the clock struck midnight, the four teams morphed into white light and entered the queue for the finals. Perhaps because this was the only queue in the whole server, the loading speed this time was surprisingly fast. In just a moment, the players had entered the scenario world. Then, the opening cinematic of the scenario appeared on the various screens in the game space. 9 heads of clouds descend. Blood rain descends. Time lies in the palm of your hand. Who will judge the world of good and evil? In the pitch-black screen, the first thing that sounded were the 4 lines of the poem. Among the audience, some players with better memory remembered that the finals of tournament for the best S1 had also started with these 4 lines. However, the content of the next part of the story changed. Dark abyss rises. At this point, the scene suddenly appeared. The black and white camera kept switching until it was fixed on the bodies. They were not normal bodies, but the bodies of the 9 heads of the dead. Of the 9 NPCs that appeared in S1, more than half were dead, and a few were missing. And beside those corpses, there was a figure standing. At first glance, it looked like a human female. She wore a white dress and had a slender body. Her waist-length hair flowed down her back. However, if one were to look carefully, one would discover an abnormality on her body. That was, her nose and cheeks had no flesh. It was as if the middle of her face had been cut off, and the bones of her nose and face were exposed. War demon shatters the void. Several seconds later, the second line was read by the narration. This time, the scene showed a scorched land. Under the dark sky, there was a river of blood, a mountain of bones, and a sea of corpses. In that hellish landscape, a demonic shadow surrounded by black fog was walking toward the camera. Time of the 4 worlds shatters. The third line of the poem followed, and the scene changed again. This time, the camera was fixed on a dilapidated courtroom. There was no one in the courtroom, and it looked like it had just experienced a magnitude 7 earthquake. The ground was littered with rubble, and it was a mess. On the wall next to the courtroom, there was a very eye-catching giant clock. At that moment, the face of the clock had cracked, and the hour and minute hands stopped at the direction of 12 o'clock. The gods fall to dusk. Moments later, the last line of the poem was played. Then, the scene turned black again. What's going on? Hey, what's next? Where's the competition? Everyone thought that after the cinematic ended, they would be able to watch the competition. But after a full minute, be it the big screen in the market, the touch screen in the login lobby, or the screen in the conference room, they were all black, and the commentator's voice did not appear for a long time. Buzz, buzz. 1 minute later, following a noise that sounded like radio interference, a face appeared on the live stream. Hello, humans. The owner of the face looked to be in his 40s. He was Caucasian and male. He had neat sideburns and clean cheeks. He was wearing a tall hat and a bow tie. Nice to meet you. I am Link, an anomaly. Link courteously finished his self-introduction. Then, in a gentle tone, he continued, Perhaps you will find my next request a bit abrupt, but I still have to say. He paused for half a second before continuing, Please die here. As he finished, something strange happened. Just as the players were still trying to figure out what was going on, a crack appeared on the dome of the game exchange at the mall space. This was not an isolated phenomenon that happened in one of the mirror spaces, but happened in all the different layers at the same time. The spectators who had gathered in front of the big screens in various shopping malls and were preparing to watch the match all discovered this sudden change at the first moment. Originally, not seeing the live stream of the competition had already shocked them, but what was happening now was completely beyond their comprehension and imagination. How is this possible? Am I seeing things? The game space is collapsing? Hey, what is that? Something is coming down from the crack. Some of the players with better eyesight saw that on top of the broken dome, inside the jagged data crack, there was a group of strange shadows, and they were rushing out. It was a group of tall humanoid creatures. Their bodies were wrapped in a layer of purple-black leather shells. Their heads were shaped like an alien with long necks. Their torsos were strong, their forearms were long and narrow, and their hind legs were curved like the feet of beasts. In addition, they had a pair of huge, thin, and cicada-like wings on their backs. Warning: the game space has been invaded by derivative data. offline and disconnected protection mechanism is not working normally. Emergency plan activated. All players' system limit has been adjusted to 30%. Please stay away from the threat with the protection of the guard robots. Your safety is your top priority. Chapter 1071. System limit of 30% was something that most players had not experienced before. This level of limit had already broken through the limit that the players faced in the scenario. If one still remembered the situation when Feng Bujue and Li Ruoyu entered the inner world together, then they would know that 30% was the limit for the players in the inner world. In this state, the game menu that the players summoned would no longer appear before their eyes, but directly appear in their consciousness. The interface that they observed would be brand new. The status bar in the new menu had completely disappeared. The players' life points, stamina points, sorcery points, and abnormal statuses would not be displayed in the form of data. These things had to be felt and measured by the players themselves. Other than that, the player's sense of pain would be strengthened. Considering that the forced disconnection mechanism had malfunctioned, this was quite scary. Of course, this state had its pros and cons. Even though the support provided by the system had decreased, in return, the limitation had decreased as well. The player's sense of perception would become more detailed and realistic. The increased system limit would no doubt allow the more powerful players to unleash greater combat power than normal, but there would be a corresponding risk. 2 minutes after the hack, inside Shiva's conference room. How is it? Can you guys do it? Brahma looked at his 4 teammates anxiously. You'll know once you see it. Vishnu shrugged. If it was possible, the person who succeeded would have left the game in white light already. F***. Brahma slammed the table and cursed. Ajura was startled when he heard that. How come the word F***ck was not blocked? Hey. At a time like this, you still care about whether the system has blocked swear words or not? Brahma asked. No, this might be very important. Among them, Yama, the female player, was the calmest. She said in a low voice, You've heard the system voice chat just now. I believe the fact that profanity wasn't blocked and the change in the game menu has something to do with the 30% limit. At that moment, the 5th person at the table, Shiva, finally spoke. Who would have thought? He was telling the truth. Hearing this, Vishnu keenly sensed something. Who? What did he say? 3 days ago, on the morning of the day I gave up, Feng Bujue snuck in my house and told me, on the day of the finals, an army of anomalies would invade the game space. Wow, Great Brahma was shocked. He widened his eyes and said, Boss, the amount of information in your words is a little shocking. If it was in the past, I wouldn't have believed a word of that. But due to recent experiences now, I don't know what to believe anymore. He heaved a sigh of relief and laughed bitterly. If I had to choose, I'd rather believe in Feng Bujue. Cousin, what exactly did you experience? Ajura was a Chinibi youngster. One of the characteristics of Chinibi youngsters was that their intuition was very accurate. Could it be that I saw a ghost? Before he finished, Shiva turned to look at his 17-year-old cousin. It's not a ghost. It's an angel. Huh? Angel? What's all this about? Great Brahma expressed his opinion straightforwardly. Shiva was about to reply to him, but bang! Suddenly, a loud crash came from the wall on the side of the conference room. Bang, bang, bang. Following that, there were 3 more rapid and fierce sounds. The wall was bumped into a protrusion. What the F***ck? This time, even Vishnu was cursing. There's something outside the wall. Theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be anything, because outside the wall is the data layer, and this space there is completely different from the space we are in. Shiva was surprisingly calm. He stood up and explained, based on what Feng Bujue said, Link and Ed worked together to create a mass-produced creature called redundancy. This creature can move at high speed in the data layer in data form, and when it gets close to the physical space, it will take form and invade it. Bang! Crack! Just as he was explaining, the metal wall of the conference room was broken and torn apart. In the next second, A redundancy soldier with purple-black skin poked its long and narrow head in and let out a terrifying groan. However, these things shouldn't be that strong. As Shiva spoke, he walked forward slowly. He raised his hand and used Feng force to pierce the redundancy's forehead. Then there was a crack, like the sound of a crustacean's shell breaking. The redundancy's forehead was pierced through by Shiva's fingertip, and it exploded. The fatally wounded redundancy did not even have the chance to scream before it turned into a data stream and disappeared into the air. If it hits the vitals, this level of skill is enough to kill one instantly, Shiva said in an explanatory tone as he pulled back his right hand. However, before he could finish his sentence, several more arms and heads popped out from the cracks in the wall. Seeing this, Shiva took 2 steps back and said, "In any case, these are the main soldiers that you're going to face." Then, he glanced at the exit of the conference room. "Before the exit is destroyed, let's get out and meet up at the market through the login lobby." Before Shiva could finish his sentence, the soldiers seemed to understand him. They let out a low growl and increased their speed of squeezing out of the crack. Remember, do not stay in the narrow space. Shiva's reaction was calm. He reminded his teammates of what to pay attention to as he punched again. He used pure physical strength to force the redundancy back. Be it the login lobby, personal storage, or thriller box, as long as the redundancy sense a data reaction in the phase layer, they will invade it. Even if you can withstand their attack in a small space, once the walls around you are broken down, you'll still be sucked into the data layer. Only heaven knows where you'll be transported to. Understood. By then, Yama had reached the door of the conference room. Before she left, she turned back to say, "Then we'll follow the old rules. We'll meet at Area 101. Speaking of which, since Brother Jew had set the common market at Underworld Frontline at Area 101, many players who were acquainted with Brother Jew set their common market there as well so that they could run into Brother Jew once in a while. Over time, the teammates and friends of those players also changed their settings. Thus, Area 101 unknowingly became a gathering place for all sorts of superstar players. "Boss, we'll be waiting for you." After the door in front opened, Great Brahma also left this sentence and walked in. Regarding the topic of Angel, when Vishnu retreated to the door, he turned back to say, "I look forward to what happens next." Then he walked in as well. In the blink of an eye, only the 2 of them were left in the conference room. "Cousin, you should go as well. Leave this place to me." At this time, Azura entered his 8th grader mode and said something that sounded like a death flag. By the way, Shiva glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. "With your power, you should be able to move freely in the data layer, right?" "That's right," Azura replied in an imposing manner. "You retreat first. I will enter directly from the crack here in a moment." As he spoke, his eyes revealed a fanatical look. That pretentious link. Let me take him down. At the same time, at Area 4 of the market. "Huh? What's going on?" A middle-aged man stood at the corner of the market. He scratched his head and looked confused. This man's surname was Li, and his name was Feng. He was the owner of Ruiyun Pavilion in the east of City S. Even Feng Bujua had to call him Uncle Li. For those who have forgotten the previous paragraph, when they see this, they might think that I'm introducing the leader of a dark organization. However, for those who have a good memory, they should remember that Ruiyun Pavilion is an art auction, appraisal, and exhibition business. Also, it's owned by Ruo Yu's family. At this point, I think everyone will understand. That's right, Li Feng is Ruo Yu's father. Speaking of Ruo Yu's father, in real life, he is definitely the standard winner in life. Let's talk about family background first. In Li Feng's grandfather's generation, there was a very famous person. That was the famous superstar at the beginning of the century, Li Hua. Even in 2055, half a century later, many people still worshipped him as their Prince Charming. Although Li Feng wasn't Li Hua's direct descendant, and there's a saying that wealth can't last more than 3 generations. But a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Li Feng's family background was pretty good. Looking at his life experience, Li Feng received a good education in the first half of his life. Although he was a bit shy, he wasn't as socially awkward as his daughter. It can be said that before the age of 20, he didn't encounter any difficulties in his life. Until he met Shui Ryun, Ruo Yu's mother. The two met when they were studying in Vienna. Their story developed for 3 to 4 years. It's not difficult to write a romance novel, so I won't go into the details. Long story short, not long after the two returned to their country, they got married and founded Ryun Pavilion. At that time, Li Feng didn't know that Shui Ryun's parents. Just like Gu Chun said, they were two of the 10 strongest spiritual ability users on this planet. Shui Ryun's aunt was Gu Chen's wife. Gu Chun and his wife. Obviously, they weren't easy to deal with. To put it simply, Li Feng joined luxurious lunch without knowing it. Oh no, he joined a family with a very dark background. In fact, even now, Li Feng didn't know about the existence of the supernatural world because he was too gullible. His wife and daughter hid it from him to protect him. He himself was just a normal person. But this normal person's luck was really good. Perhaps he was the perfect example of the saying, good people have good karma, while fools have dumb luck. In this unprecedented crisis of the game space being invaded, Li Feng was only level 10. Although he created his game character a long time ago, he didn't have much time to go online. He only occasionally played in non-sleeping mode. Li Feng, who didn't understand the situation at all, lived longer than many high-level players because he couldn't squeeze past those young people. When the first wave of attack came, Li Feng was far away from the crowd near the big screen. Thus, he was lucky enough to avoid the first wave of attack. Because he was standing behind the system store, when the invasion happened, the fleeing crowd didn't rush towards him. A few minutes later, as more and more soldiers rushed in, the speed of their growth far exceeded the killing speed of the guard robots. At this point, a group of soldiers finally arrived in front of Li Feng. But at the same time, the NPCs in the store behind Uncle Li made their move. Usually, the NPCs who stood in the system store were jokingly called wooden dummies by the players. These guys basically didn't talk, and they didn't do anything. When the players came to buy something, they only needed to stand in front of the counter and summon a virtual menu to complete the transaction. Those NPCs stood there just to create the feeling of a store. Originally, how could a store in an online game use the mechanism of talking to buy? If they really used that kind of sales method, have you seen queuing in a bank before? Have you seen queuing in a supermarket before? Let alone a game with hundreds of thousands or even millions of players, even a game with tens of thousands of players online at the same time. Why don't you try changing a store that sells health potions into a talking to buy mechanism? Do you want to buy something without queuing for a few nights? However, today, those wooden dummies use their actions to reveal their true identity to the players, enhanced guard robots. Just as Li Feng was about to be killed by one of the soldiers, the boss of the equipment store behind him jumped out of the counter and kicked the soldier in half. Then, the boss of the equipment store put on a good show in front of Li Feng. With his own strength, he faced the surprise attack of 70 to 80 soldiers head-on, killing them as if they were pigs and dogs. Unfortunately, this situation only lasted for about 2 minutes. There are only about 60 shop owners and guard robots in the area. Although the guard robots had the ability to teleport and had the physical skills equivalent to level 60 players, the player's level limit was 50, but the guard robots could be set to level 60. Moreover, the player's original limit in the game space was 2%, so they couldn't start a battle at all. So, under normal circumstances, the guard robots were more than enough to manage the players. They also had their limits. When a number of soldiers outnumbered them by 10 to 1, or even 20 to 1, the guard robots couldn't hold on any longer. Once they were injured, it was only a matter of time before they were wiped out. As for the shop owners, each of them could fight against 100 soldiers. Their upper limit was higher than a normal guard robot. When their quality reached a certain level, quantity was no longer a threat to them. But in the army of soldiers that Link and Ed created, they didn't just consist of the lowest level redundant soldiers. They also created something more advanced. RAID, redundant underscore arrays underscore of underscore independent underscore disks. In more detail, these creatures were independent redundant disk arrays. Of course, there was also a simpler name for them, sweepers. The appearance of the sweepers was very similar to humans, but their bodies were covered in the same purplish-black skin as the redundant soldiers. In terms of size, they did not appear to be as intimidating as the tall and large redundant soldiers, but the difference in combat ability between the two was like heaven and earth. Even though the sweepers' intelligence was not that high, their power was already at the level of a level 3 anomaly, and they were equipped with tactical control modules. The key point was the sweepers were mass-produced. With enough time and resources, they could be created. At the 12th minute after the invasion began, the first sweeper showed up, followed by the second, and the third. So the redundant soldiers were just the vanguard of the assault, and the sweepers were the main force that would complete the cleanup. Bang! With a loud explosion, the NPC before Li Feng exploded into pieces of data under the combined attack of the three sweepers. Uncle Li, who was covered in cold sweat, retreated step by step until his back was pressed against the counter of the system shop. He had no choice but to stop. Even though I don't know what's going on, with so many monsters surrounding me, I'm most likely going to die. This time, there was no way the guards would come to his rescue. The guards and shop owners of Area 4 were all surrounded, and they could barely fend for themselves. Currently, the surviving players had gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to form a defensive formation in order to resist the attack. But even if I die, I'll just die back in the login lobby, right? Uncle Lee mumbled to himself. He was starting to lose confidence. At the same time, one of the sweepers walked up to him and raised his fist. Bang! The punch landed. This was a solid punch, a punch that burned with blazing fighting energy. But this punch was not from a sweeper. It was from, "Uncle, are you all right?" In that instant, the silhouette of a man with incomparably defined back muscles appeared in front of Li Feng, while the sweeper who had raised his fist a second ago had already disappeared without a trace. Uncle Lee rubbed his eyes and looked at the ID of the sweeper, 7 kills. I'm fine," Uncle Lee replied. "Thank you, young man." "Ha! You're welcome." 7 kills tilted his head and waved his 2 fingers in front of his eyebrows as a greeting to Uncle Lee. When he did that, Uncle Lee could clearly see that 7 kills' right glove was still emitting white smoke. "Uncle, don't be afraid." The next second, another voice rang out. Following, it was a muscular man with a large shield who was as large as Arnold Schwarzenegger. "We will protect you." Obviously, this time, it was Long Almin. "Don't let your guard down. Uncle Lee is only level 10. Political Commissar Tan Lang soon appeared on the roof of the shop. If he is touched, I might not even have the chance to heal him. Uncle Lee was confused. How did they know that his surname was Lee? His in-game ID was clearly Cloudy Maple overturned. "How did you guys know?" Before he could finish his sentence, the leader of Blades, defeating armies, appeared to cut him off. Political Commissar is right. Everyone, stay alert. If anything happens to Uncle Lee, we'll all have to go to the leader's place for tea. Let's do this. We have to protect this place no matter what. At that moment, the members of Blades were in high spirits. Even during the competition, they had not been this aggressive. Chapter 1072. The frenzied attack of the Redundancy Army turned every corner of the game space into a chaotic battlefield. The players, the system guards, and the Redundancy Army, the three forces started a fight in various dimensions. The NPCs and Redundancy Army that were killed turned into data fragments, and the dead players turned into white light. However, those who turned into white light did not return to the login lobby and did not go offline. No one knew where they went. Many players who escaped to the login lobby after the invasion tried to contact their friends who had died not long ago through the social function, but the related menu of the system was disabled. Of course, to contact the outside world through the touchscreen, that was also impossible. What was even more bizarre was that all the timer devices in the game had stopped working at this moment. Time seemed to have stopped at midnight forever. Shopping Center, Area 1. How is it? What's the situation inside? When Weighty Words and Weighty Words walked out of the elevator, Autumn Wind turned around and asked. At this time, the two strategists from the two gaming studios, Tion D and Shan He, had formed a temporary alliance with the people from their respective guilds. They created a defense base in Area 1, which had the largest number of players and the highest quality of players. Using the power of the NPC guards, the players had the situation under control and kept the redundancy army outside the defense circle. The storage is still usable, Weighty Words replied with a serious expression. But most of the functions in the touchscreen have stopped working. Naturally, going offline is not possible. Then is the login lobby still safe? Autumn Wind asked. It's not safe. Weighty Words shook his head helplessly and gave a depressing answer. Just as I was investigating the storage room, a few monsters, they did not know about the term redundancy army, tore down the outer wall of the storage room and rushed in. I think whether it is the login lobby, the meeting room, the storage room, or the thriller box, they're all the same as this place. They could be invaded. Compared to hiding in a narrow space alone, it is safer to be in a spacious environment like this. Tis, Xiaofengsi snorted. This is really bad. He looked up at the front line at the edge of the defensive circle. Although the enemy's troops have begun to slow down, there are no signs of stopping. And the proportion of those powerful humanoid monsters is increasing. God knows how long we can hold on. He paused for a moment before continuing. Also, out of the 10 people I sent to investigate the other realms of the shop, only 3 returned. According to them, the other realms basically did not establish any large-scale resistance. Most of the players were moving in groups of 3 to 5, fighting to be the first to escape to the login dimension. At this point, he lowered his voice and said, "What I'm worried about now is, after the monsters in the other realms have cleared out the players in those realms, will they change realms and continue to attack? If that's the case." When Weighty Words heard this, he broke out in cold sweat. Even if we manage to fend off the monsters in front of us, the enemy will still have a large number of reinforcements coming from other dimensions. At the same time, in the shopping mall, Area 13. Perhaps it was due to the unlucky number of this place, but in the 20th minute after the invasion began, all the players there were wiped out. This wiped out naturally did not mean that all the players in this area were killed. In fact, less than half of the players died here. The other half fled back to the login dimension after the conflict broke out. However, whether they fled or died, at this point in time, there was not a single player left in this area. According to the system's principle of preserving the space between dimensions, a shopping mall without any players would be directly closed off. Therefore, at that moment, all the system guards that had not died and the space itself began to automatically disintegrate. All the physical objects that had been materialized were reverted to data. At this time, if there were any players in the login dimension who tried to enter Area 13, they would not be able to do so. The door to this area could no longer be opened. As for the redundant soldiers and sweepers in this area, they all turned into data, like the other objects around them, and re-entered the data layer, moving on to the next destination. On the other hand, other than those shopping malls, countless personal login dimensions were also invaded by the redundant soldiers. After all, not everyone received the warning from Phone Bujuel like Shiva. Most of the players who were in the shopping mall, after seeing the ceiling being torn apart in the monster invasion, their first reaction was to run back to the login dimension. But not long after they returned to the elevator, they realized the login dimension was not safe either. Just like what Weighty Words told Autumn Wind, whether it was the elevator, storage room, meeting room, or thriller box, the redundant soldiers could invade them all. Once they caught the sign of data activity, they would charge in. Therefore, a large number of players were ambushed in the elevator that they used the most. Fighting the redundant soldiers who were as large as beasts in this kind of narrow space was obviously disadvantageous. Many players who did not have high levels or fighting mastery died, just like that. Even if some players could survive in this kind of environment, as the 6 walls of the elevator collapsed, they would slowly lose their footing and fall into the data layer outside the wall. Then the question was, after falling into the data layer, where would they go? There were 3 outcomes. 1, they would be directly wiped out in the data flow. 2, after a short period of being carried by the flow, they would fall out of a larger data interface. To be more specific, They might suddenly appear at the gap in the ceiling of a shopping mall and then fall from the sky. 3. Even though the chance was small, after falling into the data layer, there was a chance that the players would enter the inner world. At the same time, at the 20th minute of the invasion, inside Uncle Worthless' storage room, bang, bang, crack. After a series of slamming and tearing, 2 redundant soldiers crawled into this white room through the gap in the wall. At that moment, Uncle Worthless was obviously not there. He was still in the middle of the competition. Then why would the redundant soldiers come to a space where no one was? The reason was simple. There was data activity there. Those with good memory would remember. It was mentioned earlier that at the early stage of the game, Uncle Worthless had captured a boss-level creature by chance. Even though this creature could not be summoned by him in the scenario, it could survive in a storage room and provide him with plenty of help. In other words, Uncle Worthless' immeasurable power had a lot to do with the support of this mysterious creature. Today, however, a few uninvited guests had disturbed this person's peace and quiet. Chapter 1073. Piccolo glanced sideways at the redundant soldiers who were poking their heads out of the wall. Yes, this is Piccolo from Dragon Ball. Actually, Piccolo is a more appropriate translation and also a transliteration. Of course, I also came into contact with the setting of Piccolo first. What's that? Roar. A few roars responded to him. Although the Namekians did not have a gender distinction, they were generally regarded as he. TSK. Whatever it is, it doesn't seem like it has any intention of communicating with me, Piccolo muttered. He was still sitting cross-legged in meditation. But in the next second, his figure instantly appeared beside the wall and stood in front of the 2 redundant soldiers. I can't feel any aura at all. Piccolo calmly looked at the 2 monsters who didn't even look like humans. Are you really living creatures? Bang. Before he finished speaking, one of the redundant soldiers had already swung a fist. Piccolo saw this and simply clenched his fist with one hand. He lightly raised his forearm and easily caught the opponent's fist. Oh, is that all? Piccolo's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. Boring. Before the word boring could come out of his mouth, Piccolo's other hand had already shot out 2 finger spikes at lightning speed, piercing the foreheads of the 2 redundant soldiers. In just a breath's time, Piccolo, who was not very serious, killed the 2 redundant soldiers in an instant. However, the opponent's attack did not stop there. Just as the 2 redundant soldiers turned into data fragments and dissipated, the wall on the other side was also broken. Moreover, it was broken through by a punch. Oh, what is it this time? Piccolo turned his head and looked. He saw a purplish-black arm that looked like a human arm poking in from outside the wall. A second later, the arm pulled back and punched a few more times. Soon, it created a gap big enough for the person to pass through and forced its way into the room. This one seems to have some skill. Piccolo looked at the sweeper and said coldly. Just as he was distracted, 2 more arms suddenly poked out from the crack in the wall beside him and clamped down on his shoulders. Oh, I was careless, Piccolo said in a deep voice. So if there's backup here, the redundant soldiers and sweepers didn't react to Kirk's words at all. All they did was carry out their orders to erase activity data. In the blink of an eye, the invading sweeper from the other side of the room charged towards Piccolo, who was already immobilized against the wall. The sweeper aimed a straight punch at the left side of Piccolo's chest. Bang! The powerful fist was like a huge pillar used to besiege a city, and it landed solidly on Piccolo's chest. In the end, Piccolo grunted. Then, in a casual tone, he looked at the sweeper in front of him and said, "You do have a lot of strength. Unfortunately, your attack doesn't even have the slightest bit of momentum." As he spoke, he slowly raised both hands and pressed them down on the heads of the 2 redundant soldiers behind him. I won't be knocked down by punches like this. After saying that, Piccolo clenched his fists, and the heads of the 2 redundant soldiers were easily crushed like eggs. Pa, pa, pa. At the same time, the sweeper didn't stop attacking Piccolo with his fists and feet. It was obvious that the sweeper didn't react to the deaths of the other 2 chunks of data, nor did it feel any fear. It just followed its own rhythm and continued to attack. This guy could be a robot. Piccolo quickly sensed the abnormality of the sweeper's body, so he didn't hold back. Piccolo completely ignored the sweeper's punches and kicks. His body flickered, and he appeared behind the sweeper. With a side kick, he created a large hole in the sweeper's torso. In the blink of an eye, the Namekian had dealt with 4 redundant soldiers and 1 sweeper. He was killing them all with 1 blow. Although they aren't that strong, it's a fact that they have the ability to tear space. After the sweeper was reduced to fragments of data, Piccolo looked at the damaged wall and muttered to himself, "This space. Something must be happening right now." While he was lost in thought, outside the wall of the storage room, new sounds of collisions could be heard. And from the gaps that had already been opened up, new enemies poured in. At the same time, in Area 101 of the shopping mall. When I mentioned Area 1 earlier, I said that it was the plane with the highest number of players, and the overall quality of the players was also very high. The reason I used very high and not highest was because Area 101 was far superior to all the other areas in terms of player strength. There were 6 of the top 10 teams in the S2 preliminaries: Frost Emperor, Red Cherry, Jianghu, Team 1 and Team 2 of the Gods, and Team 2 of the Regulation. As for why they were concentrated in this area, I've already mentioned it before, so I won't go into detail here. In short, the players in this area were very strong. How strong were they? They didn't have as many players as Area 1, but they still managed to withstand the attacks of the redundant soldiers, and they even had the upper hand. This was also the only dimension where the number of players escaping to the login dimension was less than the number of players remaining in the shopping mall. Damn it. What's going on? Has the Dream Company's management gone mad? In the middle of the plaza under the big screen, Fearless Champion held the spear in his hand and cleaned up the redundant soldiers as he cursed. The main force of Team 2 of the Regulation's weapons and tactics were all open. In this kind of battlefield, he was like a fish in water. Are you sure this is the game company's problem? Bladeless Swordsman, who was killing the sweepers not far away, added, "How come I feel like this is similar to the situation in S1? The anomaly has forced its way into the competition. But this time, they're not just involved in the competition." Leaf Paper, who was assisting the 2, added, "Invading the game's safe zone, forcing the system to change the limit, forcing the players to go offline, and so on. If these are all the actions of a group of AI, then I'm afraid we can't treat Thriller Paradise as a simple game anymore, right? Hey, you guys over there." Just as the 3 members of Regulation and Jianghu were conversing, about 10 meters away, someone suddenly shouted at them, "Be careful. There's something weird coming from above." The person who shouted this was a name is hard to choose, Frost Monarch's bald nickname. He was one of the best shooting players in the game, so his eyesight was naturally very good. That was why he was the first to notice the changes on the dome. When Bladeless Swordsmen heard that, they also quickly lifted their heads to look. Just above the 3 of them, inside the crack on the dome, 2 round, bloodshot eyeballs the size of water tanks appeared. Then, a large hand that was the size of a tent grabbed the edge of the crack and started to pull it open. Chapter 1074. Let's not talk about where this crisis in the game space will go from here. At this moment, let's rewind time a little and look at the situation of the 4 finalists at midnight. When it was almost midnight, Underworld Frontline, Trash Alliance, Warring States, and Regulation, a total of 20 players had arrived at their respective login spaces to await orders. At 11:59:57 real-time, the system announcement rang in their ears at the same time. Tournament for the best S2 is about to begin. Your data will be downloaded in 30 seconds. Please do not leave the login space. After the announcement, there were 20 seconds of in-game silence, and then 10 seconds countdown before the download. 9, 8, 7, 2, 1. The moment the countdown ended, the players were all teleported away in white light. Download complete. You're currently playing the finals of tournament for the best S2. Available in this mode, however, the loading screen was cut off after just 2 lines of text. Then, there was nothing else. In the Kingdom of the Dead, in the endless maze. When the players recovered, they were already in the scenario world and had gained the ability to move. Oh, 5 people, huh? Feng Bujue did not show any surprise at the anomaly during the teleportation. He looked at his 4 teammates and said, "Looks like, due to the problem during the download, the spectator system did not work smoothly." "Brother Ju, what is going on this time?" Xiaoting could tell from his brother Ju's expression that the latter knew something. "If the information I received is correct, then when we were teleported, Link and Ed had already started to invade the game space," Feng Bujue replied. "The problem during the download should be a side effect of their operation." "Where did you get that information?" Ruoyu looked at him. "And why didn't you tell us about this earlier?" "I didn't tell you earlier because there was no need to." Feng Bujue shrugged. "In any case, it's not too late for me to tell you now." He paused. "As for my sources of information, there are many." 23, right? Ruoyu said immediately. How did you know?" Brother Ju was stunned after being exposed. Ruoyu replied calmly. "Only organization or origin would be able to provide you with this kind of information. The latter is currently led by Lu Te alone. If she had been in contact with you, she would have given you the Kong Tong seal and the Yuan Chumero powder. But when you showed your character information before the game, you didn't have these 2 things in your backpack, so I can basically judge that you didn't come in contact with Lu herself or the people she sent. But there are many anomalies from Z Syndicate who can bring me information," Feng Bujue said. "How do you know it has to be 23? "Because you were vague when you answered," Ruoyu replied. Brother Ju was speechless. There's a reason for that." "I'm not interested," Ruoyu replied coldly. "If you have anything to say, say it after the game is over." "Oh, okay." This time, Feng Bujue really did not have any temper left. Seeing this, Xiao Tan, Xiao Ling, and Hua Jian all had gloating expressions. It had to be said that it was rare to see Brother Ju lose his composure, but every time it happened, it gave them an inexplicable sense of pleasure. 2 seconds later, Feng Bujue cleared his throat and changed the topic. "Then, let's get down to business." He purposely raised his voice. "After several months of hard work, I've basically grasped the movement of various parties in the Twilight of Gods. I've collaborated with Billy, the Count of Script, King Jianli, Phantom Cult, and many other parties to set up a big plan. In other words, I've already won this game of chess in the main universe. As for the other teams, I don't care about them at all. What I care about is the influence this incident will have on the next version, or in other words, the future of the main universe." "If I'm not mistaken," Xiao Ling said, "in this future, the 4 pillars of divinity will be replaced by people who are close to you, right? That's my goal. Whether it can be achieved or not depends on how well the plan progresses." Feng Bujue replied. "But no matter what, the 4 pillars of divinity have become a thing of the past, and their era of dominance has ended." At this point, his expression turned serious. "At this moment, we're at a crucial point in time that can change the structure of the main universe. Everything we do next will have a profound impact on the future of this place." "No way," Hua Jian said with confusion and suspicion. "Isn't the future of the main universe controlled by the system?" Good question." Feng Bujue chuckled lightly. "Before today, that is indeed the case, but from today onwards, that will no longer be the case." He paused for half a second before continuing slowly. "The Twilight of the Gods is an irreversible process in the main program of the game. Earlier, during the finals of S1, I caught a glimpse of related information through Zero's prophecy program. In other words, until now, all the major events in the main universe have been destined." After a second's pause, he changed the topic. "But the timeline after this event is uncertain, because from this stage onwards, the influence of the players on the main universe has reached a level where the system can't fully control it." "That can't be," Xiao Tan said. "Whether it's in terms of numbers or combat power, the players and NPCs are not on the same level. Other things aside, there are so many different planets in the main universe, and each planet has a large population. There are also many individuals with strong combat power. The system can even control the timeline of these creatures. So the influence of us players shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Things like guiding the timeline have nothing to do with the combat power of the guided. The key lies in the dimension. Feng Bujue replied. Let me give you a simple example. For example, if you play a fighting game with the theme of Dragon Ball, Vegeta is stronger than you, right? But you only need to use a controller to control him. Whoever you want him to hit, he will hit. If you want him to stand and take a beating, he will stand and take a beating. If you want him to die, he will die. Xiao Tan sighed. So that's how it is. He paused. But there is still one thing that I don't understand. Even though we are higher in terms of dimension, after entering Thriller Paradise, we have essentially lowered ourselves by one dimension. Under this premise, the system is still half a god to us. Even if the overall power of the players is higher, can we really surpass the macroscopic control of the system? Of course. Feng Bujue replied confidently. In the data world that is Thriller Paradise, to put it bluntly, the prophecy program is nothing more than mathematics. When event A happens, the program A will make some kind of response, and then there will be result A, which will then trigger event B. Many similar calculations are added together to form a complete blueprint for the future. He raised his head. But we humans are not some kind of program. We are a kind of uncertain factor. No matter how advanced the photon computer is, it will not be able to accurately predict the future that will be intertwined with human beings. Then, at that moment, Hua Jian asked, from the game's launch until today, in these 7 months, how did the system ensure that the timeline did not deviate? The system merely operated normally. It did not do anything out of the ordinary. Feng Bujue replied. As I said earlier, from this stage onwards, the player's influence on the main universe will barely surpass the control of the system. In the first 7 months, just as Xiao Tan said, the overall power of us players is still too weak. Even if we have different dimensions, we will not be able to do anything to the god of this world. So, at that moment, Ruo Yu suddenly turned to Feng Bujue with a sharp gaze and threw out a question that hit the nail on the head. Today, you plan to play the role of God? Everything depends on the person. Feng Bujue laughed. Even if I cannot go against the will of the heavens, I can still deceive the heavens. Before he could finish speaking, his complacent aura had already flowed out of his body along with his cheap force. That's enough showing off. Ruo Yu continued expressionlessly. Then, tell me the plan. Chapter 1075. At midnight, after the teleportation, on the chaotic scorched earth, on a hill made of lava and black ore, all 5 of them are in. Hong Hu's first reaction was similar to Brother Ju's. He looked at his 4 teammates and said, something must have gone wrong during the loading process. Hey, I'm just here to make up the numbers. I have no intention of entering the scenario to fight against others. The person who said that was naturally the eternal substitute of the loser alliance. Teacher Chi, there were many things to criticize about this man. First, he was the only player who had not participated in a single match since the start of tournament for the best S2. Even though Sengoku Team 1's substitute, Sasaki, had participated in several matches during the preliminaries, Teacher Chi was really just a bystander. From the preliminaries to the finals, his name was always on the substitute list. Secondly, Teacher Chi was currently a very popular player on the internet. Some might wonder why someone who had not participated in a single match would be so popular. But if one thought about it, one would understand. This was the effect of the internet. One day, someone started to talk about Teacher Chi on the forum. The person used a joking tone to say, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the substitute from the Trash Alliance has not participated in a single match. This teacher has been AFK the whole time and has successfully entered the semifinals. He has been winning the whole time, beating the rest of us players. Then, someone replied, based on this trend, perhaps he will be able to enter the finals through AFK. Then, someone replied, I wonder if we can see Teacher Chi in the finals? Then, there was this comment. I begged Teacher Chi to appear. I've been watching the tournament for the best to see Teacher Chi, but I've been watching for almost a month now, and he hasn't shown up. At this point, this topic was out of control. Don't talk bad about Teacher Chi. My life is given to me by Teacher Chi. You mortals dare to talk bad about my god Chi? Once my Wu god appears, who dares to fight with me? Even ghosts and Shiva will take a detour. Obviously, I don't want to fight with you mortals. That's right, that's right. As long as Teacher Chu appears, the universe will be destroyed in a matter of minutes. The championship is basically in the bag. Hong Hu hid him because he was afraid that the other opponents would lose their fighting spirit after seeing Teacher Chu's performance, making the competition lose its suspense too early. He is indeed a wise general. Believe in Old Turtle. Enter the finals. Believe in Old He. Obtain eternal life. Similar pranks spread like a virus, and after some time, Teacher Chu became an existence similar to Brother Chun on various forums related to Thriller Paradise. However, in reality, Teacher Chi was just a very ordinary casual player. He was not even 30 years old this year. When he was a student, he was Shadow King Sr. The two of them were also old friends in real life. Speaking of which, back then, Zhao Ying, Shadow King's real name, was kidnapped by Old Bai. Teacher Chi's surname was Bai in real life, into the path of the game. Who would have thought that after so many years, Shadow King would become a famous professional player, and Teacher Chi would at most be a white-collar worker who loved to play games? Then, how did this white-collar worker become a member of this finalist team? This story had to start from when the Trash Alliance was first formed. In this competition, the 4 members of the Trash Alliance were aiming to win the championship. They were all very capable independent players, and they had interacted many times in the game. They could be said to have a good relationship with each other. Therefore, when Ambitionists suggested that they work together, the few of them immediately agreed. When they decided to form a team, the 4 main members of the Trash Alliance had already decided the 4 of them would fight until the end. Therefore, from the beginning, they planned to find a character who would be a substitute. But where would they find such a person? It would be impossible to find a random person they were not familiar with. What if this person was bribed offline to leak information about the team or to do something that would ruin the team's image? That would be troublesome. Taking these factors into consideration, they still had to find someone they could trust. Although Hong Hu knew a lot of independent players, they were all professional players. If you asked them to watch the whole competition, that would be too much. Tired Dream also had some connections over there. Unfortunately, these people were more or less related to Zombie Blade Circle. With Tired Dream's current position, it was obviously not convenient for them to come and help. As for Uncle Trash, let us use the shortest words to describe a somewhat sad fact. He did not have many friends. In the end, it was still Shadow King, who invited Teacher Chi. Old Bai was a very suitable candidate. He was a casual player, and he was very willing to be a live spectator in this kind of top team. Moreover, he had just reached level 40, so he met the registration requirements. In addition, he was still single and had plenty of time to play. After a simple negotiation, the matter was settled. And so, Teacher Chi followed the team and went through all the difficulties. Without fighting a single match, they made it to the finals. Along the way, they received the top 10 prize of the preliminaries. Not only did his level suddenly rise to level 50, he also received all kinds of equipment. From the appearance of his strength, he was indeed a powerful player. Don't worry, the other teams are not as strong as you think. After hearing Teacher Chi's words, Shadow King patted him on the shoulder. You are not as weak as you think. Oh, really? Teacher Chi was a little excited when he heard this. No, it's fake. Unexpectedly, Shadow King replied in the next second. I'm just comforting you. Shadow King was indeed the representative of the cold-faced complaining faction. His ability to talk nonsense with a straight face was outstanding and quite deceptive. Then I have to thank you. Teacher Chi really wanted to slap him. All right, let's talk about that when we meet the other teams. 2 seconds later, Tired Dream turned his head and said to the other two, there seems to be a good show in front of us. Oh. Shadow King and Teacher Chi heard this and turned their attention in unison. At this moment, Hong Hu, Uncle Trash, and tired dreams, gazes all stopped on the vast expanse of scorched earth in the distance. Shadow King and Teacher Chi followed their gazes and quickly discovered, about a kilometer away, there were two strange shadows that were approaching each other. One of them was a figure that did not look very tall. His entire body was shrouded in a thick black, demonic aura, making it difficult to distinguish his appearance. The other figure was a little more than 2 meters tall, half-human, half-demon figure that the players recognized. It was the leader of the demons. Chapter 1076. Above the scorched earth, demonic energy reverberated. The war demon descended. The demon head was awe-inspiring. The meeting of the two demons caused a shocking change in heaven and earth. The time has come. The two demon shadows silently looked at each other for a moment, and the demon head spoke first. Who wins and who loses? It's time to see the result. Win and lose? The war demon's voice sounded ethereal and creepy. See the result? He repeated the two key words in the other party's sentence with a questioning tone. Divinity depends on power. The demon head continued. Between you and me, only a battle can decide who is the god of the chaotic scorched earth. Oh, the war demon responded, paused for 2 seconds, and continued. You blocked in front of me, just for such a boring thing. Boring? The demon head said coldly. Are you trying to escape? No, I just think you're very sad. The war demon replied. What did you say? It was the first time the demon head heard someone evaluate him like this in his life. If you want to be the god of the chaotic scorched earth, then go ahead. The war demon ignored the demon head's question and just continued. I am not a god. I'm a demon, the strongest demon in this time and space. As he spoke, he had already started walking forward again. I'm not interested in doing the kind of thing that occupies a mountain and becomes a king. That's what false gods and humans are passionate about. As the war demon spoke, he passed by the demon head. I also don't need to fight with a little demon of the second era, like you, to prove my position or power. When the leader of the demons heard these harsh words, he could only watch helplessly as the other party brushed past him. Throughout the whole process, the demon head wanted to attack the war demon several times, but he was restrained by an invisible pressure and couldn't move. Between you and me, who's strong and who's weak, you already know in your heart. The war demon continued to move forward without looking back. If you really think of yourself as a god in this long time, how can you allow the other 3 creatures in the same time and space to call themselves gods and occupy a place? He paused. In other words, since you have recognized 3 existences equal to you, then what position do you have to fight with me? The words of fighting demons were sonorous. When the demon chief heard this, he was speechless. At this moment, the leader of the demons finally understood. He was indeed lamentable. The difference between his realm and the war demons was too great. From the very beginning, the war demon had placed himself in the position of the strongest. He only attacked those who he recognized and who had the ability to pose a threat to him. As for the 4 pillar gods, the so-called gods who restrained each other and competed for territory and benefits in coexistence, in the eyes of the war demon, they didn't even have the value to be defeated, because they didn't think that they were the strongest. Wait, after a few breaths, the demon head finally spoke again. That's right. I really don't have the courage to take the initiative to start a war with the other 3 gods, because I know very well that would only bring about my own destruction. He turned around, looked at Domo's back, and asked, But what I can't do, can you do it? Do you have a way to fight against the Master of Time, the Court of Truth, and the King of the Nether Abyss alone? If you don't, then your arrogance is just arrogance and stupidity. I see. At this moment, the war demon stopped and muttered, You are not only lamentable, but also very ignorant. As soon as his voice fell, the demonic aura changed. The war demon's body didn't make any movements, but his attack had already been launched. The vast demonic aura surged and roared. The power was shocking and the ability to move the earth. The attack appeared for a moment and ended in a breath. When the demon chief came back to his senses, half of his torso had already disappeared, facing the attack of the war demon. Not to mention responding, the demon chief didn't even have any reaction. There are 3 reasons why you are still alive. The war demon looked down at the demon chief who had fallen to the ground with a condescending gaze. First, I haven't found my eye yet. My current state is not good. Second, you are also a demon and have a certain resistance to the demonic aura. Third, and the most important point, I have shown mercy. The demon chief really couldn't move this time, but he could still speak. Why? Are you going to humiliate me and then kill me? I don't have the time for that, the war demon replied. I spared your life to answer your question earlier. He continued. Earlier, you asked me how to deal with the 3 small gods. Now, I can tell you, just deal with them like this. After saying that, the war demon turned around and walked away. He didn't even look at the demon chief. At the same time, the Loser Alliance team who were watching from afar was undoubtedly shocked. What the? Teacher Xiao exclaimed. Am I seeing things? That strange black shadow instantly killed the leader of the demons? The strange shadow that you mentioned should be the legendary war demon, Hong Hu replied. What is that? Teacher Xiao asked again. Not only Teacher Xiao, but the other 3 members of the team also looked at Hong Hu with questioning eyes. Seeing this, Hong Hu pushed on his glasses and explained, I once heard from the Master of Time. In a period called the Primeval Age, there were 2 strongest existences in the main universe of Thriller Paradise. One was the supervising god, and the other was the war demon. He used his eyes to hint at the shadow in the distance. One day, a war broke out between the gods and demons. The 2 fought fiercely, and in the end, the war demon was sealed in a place called the Door to the Void. The supervising god was greatly injured, and in a crisis that could destroy the world, he was reduced to nothingness along with the whole era. So, Tired Dream continued. This person before us is a super powerful boss that has just broken out of the seal. When and how he escaped from the door to the void, I have no idea, Hong Hu said, but he is definitely strong. To be able to defeat the demon chief in an instant, he is indeed worthy of the title of strongest, Uncle Loser said. But I feel like he is a bit too strong, right? Is this the dusk of the gods or the second half of the gods? If every one of the 4 pillar gods ran into him, wouldn't he be able to take them all down one by one? That kind of thing is fine, Hong Hu said. You have seen his power. This kind of combat ability is obviously beyond the scope of strategy. If he really wants to take us down one by one, that is his freedom. In any case, I do not plan to be taken down by him. Then he suddenly raised his hand and pointed at the demon chief in the distance. I think we should focus on that person now. Chapter 1077. On the other hand, time domain above the Millennium Disk. The 5 members of Sengoku First Team were all teleported here. This was undoubtedly the territory of the Master of Time, and it was a private territory that even the Time officials rarely had the opportunity to visit. It belonged only to the Master of Time. From a distance, the Millennium Disk looked like a white disk. It covered an area as large as an island, and around this island, it was surrounded by the River of Time. The River of Time was naturally not a river composed of liquid. It was formed by an invisible, superdimensional substance. Even a Master of Time himself did not dare to touch the time flow casually. If some kind of creature fell into the time flow, the result could be imagined. All 5 people were teleported in. After the teleportation, Takeshi Shin immediately looked at his teammates next to him and said, "Is this a special rule of the finals?" "I don't think so." Takeda Tomo shrugged and replied, "There was no notice before the game, and there was no mention of it during the loading process. How can there be such a rule?" "Well," Yusuji Hito also nodded and said, "It is indeed strange that there is no introduction to the script. What's so strange about it?" "Oda, AI didn't seem to think so. I think this is normal. The so-called finals. Isn't it a battle to the death where the winner is king? kill all the people in the other teams, and annihilate the guys who are in our way. This is the only rule. Seeing you so motivated, I feel a lot of pressure." At this time, the substitute player who accidentally entered the script, Sasaki, was already squatting on the ground with his arms around his knees. He looked at the floor with an expression of mourning. He was such a person who would feel extremely nervous and depressed as long as he encountered a little thing outside of the plan. However, even with such an obvious personality flaw, Sasaki could still occupy a place in the studio's first team, which was enough to show his extraordinary strength. "Stop talking nonsense." At this time, Oda AI was standing just behind Sasaki. When she saw the latter's appearance, she almost instinctively kicked him in the butt. Unexpectedly, ouch! Sasaki Akira was kicked down and fell on his face. In the next second, the whole Sengoku team realized something. Although Oda AI's kick wasn't too heavy, it was probably just the strength of a fight between friends. But, logically speaking, this kind of action shouldn't be possible. Based on the normal limitation of the system, in the scenario world, other than the case of indiscriminate damage skill, the most harmful action that could be done between teammates was a light tap on each other's head or arm. Furthermore, when doing such an action, the user could not have the intention to harm the other party. To put it simply, actions that could cause more than 1% life points loss, no matter the intention, should not be done to teammates. However, no matter how he looked at it, Oda AI's kick had already exceeded that limit. "What's going on?" Jishin's expression froze as he looked at Oda AI and asked, "How did you do it?" "Even if you ask me that," Oda AI was equally baffled. "I just wanted to do it. I didn't expect that I would actually be able to kick him." As the team strategist, Takeda Ji was silent for a moment before he came up with a very constructive suggestion. "Let's try to beat Sasaki up." "Hey!" Sasaki was shocked. "Why me? If you want to do this kind of experiment, can't you just attack each other? Why are you ganging up on me?" Before he could finish, he was attacked from 4 different directions. There was no room for him to evade, and he was beaten up. You guys." Sasaki lay on the ground, and his mournful face became even more sorrowful. "I'm under so much pressure." As expected, we are in a state where we can attack our teammates. The rules of this scenario, sure, are strange. In any case, we'll have to be careful during the battle. After the 4 of them finished fighting, they completely ignored Sasaki and began to discuss business with each other. At the same time, at the Court of Truth, this place had already become a mess of ruins. Like a haunted house that had been abandoned for a long time in a horror movie, the whole place was shrouded in an oppressive and lifeless atmosphere. However, at that moment, there were still people in the courtroom. 12 figures were sitting on the tattered mattress. Even the judges' seats were filled to the brim. When Phantom Dawn recovered from the darkness of the teleportation, he realized that he was already standing on the defendant's stand in the courtroom. There were no teammates or other players around him. He had been teleported here alone, to this place that was feared by many in the main universe. Phew! Just as Phantom Dawn looked around him, a sound that sounded like a gust of wind came from behind him. Turning to the source of the sound, Phantom Dawn saw a creature completely covered in a black cape float onto the judge's stand. Dawn! 2 seconds later, a clerk at the bottom of the judge's stand slammed the gavel in his hand and announced loudly, "Rise!" As he finished, all the NPCs in the courtroom stood up. The first round of trial for Phantom Dawn is now in session. After he said that, the black cape on the judge's stand used a voice that sounded like Lord Voldemort with late-stage tuberculosis to continue. "Everyone, please take your seats." Facing this, Phantom Dawn, who sat on the defendant's stand, chose not to say anything. He waited to see what would happen. He placed 90% of his attention on the judge in the black cape. He did not pay much attention to the black shadows on the bench and the 100 or so NPCs behind him. After a short silence, the judge said, "Mr. Inspector, please come forward to give your statement." "Yes." A loud reply came from the left side of Phantom Dawn, and a figure stood up. Phantom Dawn turned to look and realized that the prosecutor was a humanoid creature in a tight black suit. His skin was light brown in color. Honorable judge, members of the jury, the prosecutor nodded at the two groups of people. Please allow me to start my statement. Then, he picked up a document from the table and placed it before his eyes. Phantom Dawn had good eyesight. He could read the words on the document clearly, but unfortunately, he could not understand the meaning of the words. The defendant, Phantom Dawn, killed 11 officers between year 492 and 501. His motive was clear, his method was cruel, and the evidence was conclusive. The content of the prosecutor's statement did not surprise Phantom Dawn, because everything he said was the truth. Looks like, after this part of the plot, there's going to be a tough battle ahead. Phantom Dawn was not interested in the statement. At that moment, he was making use of the time to observe and think. If the battle started, how was he going to escape from this courtroom in one piece? Chapter 1078. The Kingdom of the Dead Spirits, King City. This was the castle of the King of the Abyss. At the same time, it was also his burial ground. Who would have thought that this king of the Kingdom of the Dead Spirits would become the first of the four-pillar gods to fall in the twilight of the gods? The ones who made this happen were the 5 most powerful figures in the main universe. They were the Count of Script, Dienli King, Sam Montier, Duo Ling, and Talion. In terms of combat power, the Count of Script was second only to the four-pillar gods. After Lao Wang regained his strength, he was not any weaker than the four-pillar gods. As for the other 3, they were all second in command of the four-pillar gods. Sam Montier was once the strongest timekeeper. Duo Ling was the leader of the 9 heads of the dead spirits, and Talion, the curse god officer, had always been the right-hand man of the leader of the demons. Even in terms of strength on the surface, the 3 mentioned above were of a higher level than the average magistrate, juror, and necromancer's 9 arches. Not to mention, they had secretly established the Phantom Fiend Church and accumulated a large amount of faith power. Then, here was the question, why would the 5 of them work together to defeat the King of the Abyss? The answer was obvious. Feng Bujue was the mastermind behind this. Half a month ago, on the night of the second round of the semi-finals, Brother Ju and the 3 from the Phantom Demon Church had already made a plan to eliminate the King of the Abyss. The key to this plan was Fu Ling, the former 9 heads of the dead spirits who had been sealed in the manure swamp of the Devil-Eating Island. According to Duo Ling, he and Fu Ling had fought for the position of the leader of the 9 heads of the dead spirits. Logically speaking, Fu Ling was slightly stronger, but Duo Ling was much more cunning. He used various methods to win over the support of the other 9 heads of the dead spirits. Therefore, Fu Ling lost, and the price of failure was eternal damnation. Many years later, under a coincidence, Feng Bujue released Fu Ling from the seal, and this became an opportunity. Even though she was imprisoned, as a spirit, as long as there was strong resentment, her power would increase. Therefore, after all these years, not only did Fu Ling's strength not stagnate, it became even stronger. After Feng Bujue understood the history of the battle between Snatch Spirit and Fu Ling, he decided to go along with the plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain and kill the tiger with a borrowed knife. First, he ordered Seizing Spirit to lead the 9 chiefs to a designated location and wait for orders. Then he used Seizing Spirit as bait to lure Fu Ling there as well. After the 2 sides met, there was no doubt that it would be a bloody battle of life and death. Meanwhile, Snatch Spirit himself stayed out of the matter. While Jiu Kuei and Fu Ling were fighting, he quickly met up with his other 2 colleagues from the Illusion Fiend Church. Then, he brought along Brother Zun and Lao Wang and headed straight for the palace. It didn't matter how Fu Ling's battle was going. After all, the 9 chiefs wouldn't be able to get away in a short period of time. So, there were only a few shrimp soldiers and crab generals left to guard the royal city. In the face of those 5 ferocious fiends, small fries were of little use. Moreover, Soul Snatcher knew the situation of King City, the distribution of the troops, and so on like the back of his hand. With the help of both the inside and the outside, the undead army was basically defeated. Of course, the king of the netherworld Abyss himself was also very strong. He wouldn't be defeated so easily. Among the four pillar gods, in terms of fighting one-on-one, the leader of the demons was the best. The king of the netherworld Abyss was the second best. This god who controlled the power of the undead wasn't easy to deal with. However, the 5 people who came to surround him were not easy to deal with either. If the king of the netherworld Abyss could still kill the 5 of them in a 1-on-5 battle, then he wouldn't need to cultivate the 9 chiefs of the dead souls. It was estimated that he wouldn't have a problem fighting 2 pillar gods alone. If he was smart enough, he could use some long-range and short-range tactics to swallow up the forces of the other 3 gods. Unfortunately, that was just a hypothesis. The reality was, when these 5 people, strictly speaking, none of them were human, appear together, the king of the netherworld Abyss already understood that he didn't even have half a chance of winning. In the end, this king of the kingdom of the dead souls chose to take a bow with dignity. He didn't make any pointless resistance or counterattack. He also didn't want to drag anyone down with him. He seemed to have his own unique view of death. There was no fear in his heart. On the contrary, he had a sense of relief and a sense of tiredness. The time had come, and dusk was coming. His era was over. The stage of a new era would be left to the new rising forces at the last moment. The king of the netherworld Abyss took off the crown of the dead souls from his head and slowly placed it on the throne. Then, he turned around and disappeared. He returned to the torrent of data and became a part of this world. After he completely disappeared, Spirit Snatcher opened his mouth. Everyone, he glanced at the 4 people around him and asked in a deep voice, "Is there anyone who wants to take the throne?" The current Spirit Snatcher was no longer a huge skull that floated in the air. After swallowing the mushroom that Feng Bujue had given him, under the effect of the item's second effect, "I've added a mushroom for you." Permanently changes the style of an NPC. Caesar's appearance turned into a human. But now, he looked like a human-shaped ice sculpture made of light blue ice crystals. Through his translucent ice skin and flesh, one could clearly see the human skeleton inside his body, as well as many blue light spots that were constantly floating in his body like fireflies. "Humph, you don't have to be so polite with us." Dianhai King still looked like a child, but his tone was not polite. "We have no interest in this throne to begin with." "Ha! Regarding the ownership of the crown, you and Feng Bujue have already come to an agreement, haven't you?" The Count of Script's attitude was more mature. He smiled at Spirit Snatcher. "Why do you need to ask?" He paused, and a cold glint flashed through his eyes. "Could it be you're trying to test our reaction?" Spirit Snatcher did not answer this question. He did not seem to hear the latter half of the sentence. He turned back to look at Sam Montier and Taliom. The 2 had been in cahoots with him for many years, so naturally, they had no objections. Therefore, Spirit Snatcher took a step toward the throne. "Okay, since no one has any objections." Spirit Snatcher walked up the steps before the throne and said, "I shall ascend to this throne. From now on, all living beings will be insignificant. Lowly redemption, hypocritical guidance, cycle of despair. Everything shall cease to exist and be reborn from destruction. Spirit Snatcher mumbled as he walked. He reached before the throne and raised the crown of the dead. "Shall be crowned, Chi." Just as Spirit Snatcher was about to put on the crown and say the word king, a ray of death shot at him. Instantly, the ray of energy knocked the crown from his hand to the ground. A cold female voice rang out at the same time. "You think you're worthy?" Chapter 1079. Why? When Duo Ling said that, his hand was pierced through by the beam of light, but he acted as if nothing had happened. In a low voice, he said, "Why would you appear here?" The moment he said that, his gaze fell to the end of the hall, and he saw Fu Ling's figure. "Aren't you very calculative?" Fu Ling glared at Duo Ling and walked closer. "Why don't you take a guess? You are very strong, but not at the level of the 4 pillar gods. Even if you were able to defeat the other Ling Kuei alone, it would still take a long time. Furthermore, It's impossible for you to come out unscathed after the battle. When he said this, his expression changed slightly. So, someone must have helped you. You guessed right. At that moment, another voice rang out and joined their conversation. Following that, a black stone that was floating in midair appeared before them. This stone was about 3 cubic meters in size, and its texture was similar to crystal. It had an irregular shape, and the surface of the stone was dotted with grayish-white patterns. Even though it looked like an inorganic object, in reality, it was a living thing, and its name was Shapeless Demon. So it's you. Duo Ling looked at Shapeless Demon, and there was regret in his voice. No, I should say it is you. From Duo Ling's tone and expression, it was clear that he had been wary of Shapeless Demon for a long time. Of the 9 spirits, Shapeless Demon had always been the most mysterious. No one knew the limit of its power, and it never revealed its thoughts. In the past few years, Duo Ling had put Shapeless Demon in danger many times to test the power of this stone, but every time, Shapeless Demon would use ingenious methods to escape unscathed. It was practically invulnerable. After the last tournament for the best, you suddenly disappeared. Duo Ling paused for 2 seconds and then said to Shapeless Demon, "Today, you appear here and stand on Fu Ling's side. Could it be that you are a spy planted by her?" "Huh." A condescending laugh came from the floating stone. His voice and tone were like a radio announcer's, warm and pleasant to the ear. "Duo Ling, do not underestimate things you do not understand. You do not have that kind of power and qualification." Hearing this, the expressions of the Count of Script and Gian Lai King, who were watching from the side, changed. "You? Who exactly are you?" Snatch Spirit's expression turned serious. "Or should I say, what are you?" "If you can be crowned king as you wish, you will naturally know," Formless Devil replied. "But now, it is still unknown who will become the new king." Oh, hearing this, Duo Ling turned his gaze back to Fu Ling. "You think you can compete with me for the throne? What a joke." Fu Ling replied coldly. "You should say that to yourself." She strode toward Duo Ling with her head held high and said aggressively, "In terms of strength, I was the #1 spirit general under the king of Nether Abyss back then. Who do you think you are? In terms of qualifications, back then, you used politics and schemes to defeat me and imprison me. I admit that. After all, it was my own lack of ability. But now, you've switched sides with the Ghost King, vainly attempting to replace him. Let me ask you, in the entire Death Spirit Kingdom, who would submit to you?" "Ha, qualifications." Duo Ling smirked coldly. "You still want to discuss the so-called legitimacy with me? How boring." He clenched his fists and shouted, "To make someone submit, the most reliable method is power." Then, Fu Ling continued, "Let's have a contest of power." "Humph." Duo Ling was still smirking coldly. "Fu Ling, after so many years, how come you haven't improved at all?" He opened his arms and gestured at the 4 people around him. "This world is a world where the winner is king. The process and method are explained by the winner. Why should I give up the advantageous situation and have a one-on-one duel with you?" "Because," at this time, Formless Devil spoke, "this is Feng Bujua's idea." "What did you say?" That name seemed to have magic, causing Duo Ling's expression to change. Did he not make it clear enough? At this moment, Jianli King, who was standing behind Duo Ling, suddenly added in a cold tone, "Ha ha!" The Count of Script laughed. "You are too young." He shook his head and said to Duo Ling, "You have both shrewdness and ambition, but you are not experienced and thorough enough." "What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" Seizing Soul's voice instinctively rose, because an emotion called fear was faintly rising in his heart. "You still don't understand?" Formless Devil said, "Why would I appear on the battlefield between Fu Ling and the Spirit Kuei? Who else would be able to tell me this information in advance?" Hearing that, Duo Ling's mind buzzed, and a knot of resentment formed in his chest. In other words, at this moment, Taliomu maintained his composure. He used his usual, eerie tone to continue. "When Feng Bujua set up the trap for us to surround King Yu, he also set up another trap outside this one. Then, He turned to the Count of Script. Elder Script, you and Kinghua are involved in this as well, right? That's right. The Count of Script replied casually. Feng Buju's arrangement. We all knew about it beforehand. On one hand, he had Soul Snatching come up with the plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain, and on the other hand, he had Formless Demon hide in the dark. After Soul Snatching left the battlefield, she would lend Fu Ling a hand. He stroked his beard and smiled. The Count of Script now looked like an old sorcerer with white hair and a long beard. He turned to Duo Ling. Do you think it's that easy to replace the position of the four pillars? Duo Ling, on your path to being crowned king. Fu Ling is an unavoidable obstacle that you have to cross. You have to cross it yourself. All right, let's not waste any more time. There are 7 of us here. If we really want to fight, it'll be the 3 of you from Phantom Demon Church against the 4 of us. Think about it. 2 seconds later, Dian Yao King continued. Duo Ling, what Feng Bujue means is whoever wins between you and Fu Ling will be crowned king. You said it yourself. To make someone submit, the most reliable method is power. Then, use your power to carve out a path for the future. Damn it. At this moment, Duo Ling was shaking, and he was furious. Feng, you tricked me, that's enough. Don't look like you're admitting defeat before the fight even starts. Sam Montier then gave his ally a fair warning. Feng Buju's method has some logic to it. As he said that, he retreated to the side. It's not that easy to replace a god. A position that is bought without a corresponding price usually won't last long. You have a point. Talion made his stance clear. Duo Ling, will you become an existence that surpasses us, or will you perish here? Let us witness it together. Chapter 1080. At this point, a battle was unavoidable. Seeing the approaching Fu Ling, Soul Caesar suppressed the panic in his heart and temporarily put aside his hatred for Feng Bujue. With a thought, he launched a surprise attack. Instantly, a violent light shot out from Soul Caesar's mouth and headed straight for Fu Ling. This attack was so powerful that it was unexpected. Not only Sam Montier and Talion, but even the Count of Script and Dianhai King were shocked by this. Theoretically speaking, with Soul Caesar's ability, his instantaneous attack should not have contained so much power. However, Soul Snatcher was a rather unique NPC. Other than relying on his own abilities, he was also good at making use of various external factors. For example, he would play tricks and attack those who were of the same faction as him. Another example was that he would collect legendary items like the Demonic Soul Pivot to increase his combat power. From this point alone, he did look like a player. At this time, Soul Caesar was relying on the help of an item to launch his sneak attack. Name: Raging Dragon's Throat Type. Other quality: Legendary Special Effect. When equipped, a dragon's roar could be released from the mouth. Cooldown time: 24 hours. Consumes 50% of maximum spiritual energy. The power of the dragon's roar is dependent on your maximum spiritual energy. Remark: the legendary doctor, Mad Doctor by Kaja, once performed a risky operation due to a bet with someone when he was young. That day, he successfully removed this organ from a living, raging dragon in one piece. Even though the surgery this time could be said to be miraculous, in order to show off his skills, Baikager made another bet with the other party. He claimed that he could use his own magical surgery to transplant the dragon's throat into the body of a humanoid creature while retaining some of its original functions. We all know what happened after that. The scar-faced man who made the bet with him was not satisfied with his loss, so he transmigrated to another dimension and became an unlicensed doctor. Humph, that is your style. Other people might be surprised by Soul Caesar's sudden attack, or they might not be able to react in time, but Fu Ling was definitely not. The pain and humiliation he had experienced in the swamp on Devil Chomp Island was enough to change any proud living being. If Fu Ling did not learn her lesson after being imprisoned for so many years, then Feng Bujue would not give her the chance to compete with Fu Ling for the throne. At the beginning of the battle, he suddenly used his trump card and caught the enemy off guard. Thus, he gained a decisive advantage. Fu Ling, who was already prepared, said as she dodged her opponent's attack, "In terms of battle tactics, it is indeed very clever. This is also where I am inferior to you." Tis, seeing that the other party had dodged the dragon roar, Snatch Spirit suddenly turned around, wanting to retrieve the spirit crown that had fallen to the ground. How unsightly, soul-snatching. Fu Ling did not become agitated because of her opponent's actions. She calmly raised her arms and formed a seal with her 10 fingers. The undead energy in her body began to move and converge, gathering at her fingertips an energy that was not inferior to the dragon's roar just now. Winner takes all. Snatch Spirit picked up the crown and quickly put it on his head. Failure is the most unsightly thing. At that moment, even though Fu Ling had not launched her attack, Formless Demon, Dianli King, and the Count of Script knew that the winner had been decided. 2 seconds later, the spiritual energy shot out, heading straight for Snatch Spirit. The latter had already put on the crown and turned around to face the attack. "It is my victory." Snatch Spirit laughed wickedly and used one hand to receive the attack. But his crystal-like body was shattered into ice shards in the next moment. How is this possible? This caused Snatch Spirit to revert back to having only one head, and it was a head with a despairing expression. "Impossible. I have already put on the crown. I am the king of the undead. I've said it from the beginning." Fu Ling walked forward coldly and replied as she stepped onto the stairs before the throne. "You think you're worthy?" Snatch Spirit, looks like you've misunderstood the nature of the crown of the undead and seriously underestimated the power of the king of the abyss. At that moment, Formless Demon's gentle voice rang out again. "The crown does contain unparalleled power, but that does not mean anyone who puts it on will gain this power." Before he finished, Fu Ling had already arrived before Snatch Spirit. Without hesitation, she plucked the crown from the floating, immobile head and continued Formless Demon's words. "You have to have the will to make the crown submit to you before you can become its master, or else this is just a decoration. This is impossible." Snatch Spirit's power was weakening, and he would not be able to maintain his existence anymore. In his long life, he had never been so unwilling to give up before. He was already so close to his goal, so close that he could reach it with just a stretch of his hand, but everything had vanished into thin air at this moment. If you gave it your all and fought me head-on, it would be hard to tell who would win. Fu Ling looked at Snatch Spirit with condescension. "Unfortunately, you have chosen a method that is as good as suicide. Sigh. That is why people who think they are smart are harder to persuade than complete idiots." The Count of Script sighed. "Snatch Spirit, when I passed on Feng Bujue's words to you, it was very clear. On your path to becoming king, Fu Ling is an unavoidable obstacle that you have to overcome. You have to rely on yourself to overcome it." Dianli King added, "If you can defeat Fu Ling with your own power, then naturally, you will have the will to make the crown submit to you, but you have chosen to avoid this battle of destiny. This only proves that your tolerance is no different from when you used a trick to defeat Fu Ling. A character like you will never be able to become a god." The conversation between the two of them seemed to have concluded that the Spirit Snatcher had been defeated, and Snatch Spirit could not say anything to refute them. In the end, his ambition had turned into a wisp of dust in the main universe along with him. Just like he said, the loser was ugly. To have this ugliness forgotten by the world was already a kind of mercy from the winner. Then, after Snatch Spirit disappeared, Fu Ling turned to Samontier and Talion. "Are you going to avenge your friend?" "We are not as innocent as you think," Samontier replied with a cold smile. It looked like Snatch Spirit's death did not affect him that much. "Snatch Spirit's fate has been decided. Reality has proven that his tolerance is nothing more than that," Talion added. "I cannot find a reason to avenge someone like that." "Very good." After getting their answer, Fu Ling strode forward and turned to sit on the throne. "Then I invite everyone to witness this," Fu Ling said as she raised the crown. "From now on, The kingdom of the dead will have a new king, a queen. Chapter 1081. The chaos-scorched earth, where the war demon passed. Travelers from another world. The head of the demons looked at the 5 players who came in front of him and said in a deep voice, "You dare to come in front of this king. You have guts. Okay, don't be stubborn." Uncle Worthless sighed and said, "We can see how badly you are injured. How strong we are. You can also see it." He paused. At this moment, bluffing will only make you look worse. Yeah. Hong, who on the side, pushed his glasses and said, "Although I have the suspicion of scolding myself, I still have to say that you are now a tiger that has fallen to the plains. Why don't you put down your pride and have a good talk with us?" The head of the demons heard this and sneered. "Humph. What is there to talk about with me? A defeated demon." "Oh, demon, aren't you too pessimistic?" Hong Hu continued, "Failure for a while doesn't mean that you will never have a chance to counterattack. You can learn much more from failure than from success. I don't need you to teach me the philosophy of life." The demon said coldly, "Just say it. What do you want from me?" "Well, since you brought it up," Hong, who was not polite with the other party, "let's make a deal. Time domain on the Millennium Disc." After the players of Sengoku beat up Sasaki and took a short break, they were ready to explore this space. However, right at this moment, a low and deep voice abruptly sounded out. Sure enough, there is something unknown mixed in the time flow. The voice came from all directions at the same time, echoing around the players. "Even my inviolable space has been set foot by you ants from another world." When the voice fell, a flickering silver light suddenly appeared in midair, like mist and rain, slowly falling. If one looked closely, they could tell that the falling material was sand. A few seconds later, the sand solidified into a towering figure. It turned from nothingness to reality and finally revealed its true appearance. It was a strange creature about 15 meters tall. Its main body was a huge hourglass. Silver sands of time flowed in the hourglass. Its head was a silver sphere floating above the hourglass. It had no physical connection with its torso. The hourglass was its torso. On both sides of its body, there was a metallic silver arm. The arms were not in contact with the hourglass. They were suspended in midair. "The Time Master, huh?" Jishin muttered as he looked at the tall NPC before him. "Speaking of which, we should be the first batch of players to see the Time Master's true face." "Perhaps," Takeda Tomo continued. "There are indeed many rumors about his appearance, but most of them seem to be nonsense. The Master of Time who hides in the Time Realm and never shows himself. The most mysterious of the 4 pillar gods." Yusuji Hito looked at the Master of Time and muttered, "So this is what he looks like." In various ways, Sasaki Akira's face was bitter. He gives off so much pressure. When the Time Master heard these otherworldly travelers' comments about him, he was obviously displeased. "Ants." His voice came from his head, giving off a sense of majesty and wisdom. "Trespassing into my territory is already a capital offense." He paused. "If you are pious, perhaps I can consider." Screech. He did not finish his sentence, because the sharp light from a katana interrupted his words. Although the long and narrow saber aura did not cause any substantial damage to the Master of Time, it did trigger a defensive force field around the Master of Time. At that moment, a green light wall appeared like ripples on the surface of water, automatically blocking the attack. Hey, why is that?" Sasaki Akira pulled a long face, holding his head high with both hands, and shouted at Oda AI, the initiator of the attack. "Ah, it's nothing," Oda AI replied in a weak tone. "When I heard the word ant, I felt a little uncomfortable." As she spoke, she raised the katana and placed the back of the katana on her right shoulder. "After hearing a few words, I decided to cut this guy." She tilted her head. "But, then again, he is one of the 4 pillar gods. The attack just now was completely ineffective. It was a little unexpected. Your attitude of, 'I'll just cut him to test his defense,' is a little too arrogant." Sasaki Akira could only express his feelings by complaining. "Humph." Takeda Tomo lowered his head and laughed. Since it has come to this, so be it. Takeda Tomo added. Anyway, we don't know how to act pious anyway, right? Slaying a god. Even you, Sujihito, who had always been serious, showed a smile. Sounds interesting. On the other hand, at the court of truth, so that is all the accusations against Phantom Dawn. After a long, picturesque, and embellished statement, the brown creature, the procurator, finally concluded his speech. Basically, anyone who paid attention to this statement, after listening to one-third of it, would have confirmed that Phantom Dawn was guilty. This was because his crime and process were too obvious. Unlike Feng Bujue, who would occasionally tamper with unique data, Phantom Dawn was a typical righteous person. No matter what he had done in the main universe, he had no intention of hiding it. Even so, Phantom Dawn still had a chance to defend himself. The Court of Truth's rules could not be changed, not even by the judge. Therefore, the next. Even though the judge's face was hidden in the shadows, Phantom Dawn could feel that the NPC was looking at him. Sky-swallowing Phantom Dawn, regarding the crimes described by the prosecutor. Do you plead guilty? Umph. Phantom Dawn smirked at the question. Does it make a difference whether I admit to it or not? Huh. The judge laughed, and it was a chilling laugh. If you admit to your crimes, both parties can make their closing statements. Then, we will wait for the jury to come to a conclusion, and I will announce the verdict. He paused for 2 seconds. If you do not admit to your crimes, we will enter the trial. You can defend yourself, or you can get a lawyer to defend you. If you need one but cannot find one, the court will assign one to you. All right, I understand. Phantom Dawn shook his head to interrupt the judge. Stop wasting time. I admit to bang. Just as he was about to say the word guilty, the door to the courtroom was kicked open from the outside. The light from outside the door projected a shadow on the wall behind the judge. Objection. When a voice was heard, the shadow stood to the side and waved his arm. The most heaven-defying trial in the history of the Court of Truth had begun. Chapter 1082. Everyone in the courtroom turned their heads to look at the figure at the door. It was a man in a purple suit. He was thin, and there was a wicked smile on his lips. Feng Bujue. When Phantom Dawn saw Brother Ju, the name slipped out of his lips. It would have been fine if he did not say it, but once he did, the courtroom exploded. What? He is Feng Bujue? The legendary Feng Bujue? That's weird. I hear he has 4 heads, and his eyes can shoot out death rays. Nonsense. I heard that Feng Bujue is the sworn brother of the leader of the demons. He has 72 transformations, a hairy face, and a mouth. Stop bullsh ting. Feng Bujue is supposed to be a fair-skinned, handsome young man. Everything below his head is half beast man. Obviously, Brother Ju's reputation in the scenario was so widespread that everyone knew about him. The NPCs from various planets in the main universe had all heard of his name before. But there was a problem with the way they got their information. Basically, the information that they got was based on rumors and rumors. This caused them to have different degrees of misunderstandings about Brother Ju. However, in the information about Brother Ju, there was a core piece of information that was not distorted by the rumors. Therefore, all the NPCs there had a basic consensus, and that was Feng Bujue was a man who had created many legends. He was despicable, cunning, and not someone to be trifled with. Bang, bang, bang. Silence. Several seconds later, the clerk slammed the gavel on the table and ordered the noisy crowd to stop. Soon, the courtroom quieted down again. The judge in the black robe also spoke. Feng Bujue, how dare you break into the courtroom during the trial? Do you know the punishment for disrespecting the Court of Truth? I was in a hurry when I entered the courtroom, and I accidentally broke the door. Brother Ju walked forward and interrupted the man. At most, it's just vandalism. What does that have to do with contempt of court? As he spoke, he furrowed his brows and pointed at the damaged door behind him. Besides, this broken door has been in disrepair for a long time. Instead of saying that I destroyed public property, it would be better to say that this door ran out of service when I was using it normally. How dare you? In the face of this blatant sophistry, the clerk suddenly became angry. It was as if he had been possessed by a county magistrate. He roared out two words that were almost impossible to use in a court, but were frequently used in a court. Then he raised his gavel and slammed it down again. Bang! Crack! Unexpectedly, because he used too much force, the gavel broke after he struck it down. Look, there are broken things everywhere. The hardware of your courtroom lacks maintenance. How can you blame me for that? Feng Bujue was even more reasonable now. Then, the clerk breaking the gavel is also a contempt of court. The clerk's anger rose again, but there was nothing else he could break. He slammed his fist on the table, but he was afraid that he might break the podium, so he could only glare at Brother Jew. All right. 2 seconds later, the judge lowered his head to tell the clerk, Poke, calm down. Be careful of your image. His indifferent words made the clerk, who had a thunderous voice and an imposing aura, tremble in fear. I am sorry, Your Honor. The clerk called Poke turned his head back respectfully. I have lost my composure. Never mind. The judge waved his hand that was hidden under the black robe and picked up the gavel before him. There was another one on the podium, and this one was naturally for the judge to use. In any case, bang! As he spoke, the judge raised the gavel lightly and knocked it on the wooden gavel on the table. In an instant, a formless energy burst forth, causing everyone in the court to tremble. So that's how it is. The judge is using mental power. In less than half a second, Phantom Dawn analyzed the judge's main power system from that one hit. The judge was oblivious to that. He turned to Brother Jew and said, Feng Bujue, I will not pursue the matter of you breaking the door, but you suddenly barged into this courtroom, interrupted the trial, and said something like objection. What is the meaning of this? Isn't my meaning obvious enough? When Brother Jew said that, he walked to the side of the dock. He raised his arm and pointed at Phantom Dawn. I am stopping my client from confessing. The judge heard that and hesitated before asking, You are Phantom Dawn's lawyer? Yes. Feng Bujue gave an affirmative answer without changing his expression. Hey. Phantom Dawn narrowed his eyes at Brother Jew. Who asked you to defend me? Feng Bujue ignored Phantom Dawn's question. He turned to the judge and said, Your Honor, the Court of Truth allows the defendant to hire a lawyer to defend themselves, right? That's right, the judge replied. The judge replied in a low voice, but the lawyer hired by the defendant must be qualified to practice law. He paused. Feng Bujue, let me make this clear. Don't think you can get away with your identity as a traveler from another world. He tapped the table lightly with his finger and continued. The lawyer's qualification that I'm talking about has to be a certificate from the government of a legal territory in the main universe. Humph! At that moment, the brown-skinned prosecutor stood up and smirked coldly at Brother Jew. Feng Bujue, if you cannot prove your qualification, then you are also in contempt of court. Oh, when Brother Jew heard that, he turned around to look at the prosecutor. Who are you? You poop-faced bird. Poop-faced bird. The prosecutor had not heard that term in his life. You be ****starred. I'm a famous and illustrious Biff Murray, also known as the Invincible Procurator. You dare to call me a poop-faced bird? Poop-faced bird, poop-faced bird, poop-faced bird. After Feng Bujue heard the man's self-introduction, he repeated the term 3 times in front of the man, and his tone was getting louder and louder. Bifu was so angry that he was trembling, but he couldn't argue with the rascal in front of him. He could only complain to the judge like a bullied child. Your Honor, I object. He insulted me. Sustained. The judge replied and turned to Brother Jew. Feng Bujue, please mind your choice of words. Okay. Feng Bujue nodded at the judge and then turned around to walk to Biff. I'm sorry, Prosecutor Biff. I shouldn't have called you a poop-faced bird. Although this term more accurately describes the overall image of your appearance in the eyes of us earthlings, calling you this still seems to be offensive to public decency. I won't call you poop-faced birdman anymore. At least in court, I won't call you poop-faced birdman anymore. As for whether I call you poop-faced birdman in private, or if I accidentally mention poop-faced birdman to others when you're not around, enough is enough. UB asterisk starred. When Biff heard the word sorry, the thought that crossed his mind was, this Fong Bujua seems to be quite polite. But then, the man used the same term to insult him 5 more times, and it did not seem like he was going to stop anytime soon. This made Biff explode in anger. Fong Bujua, if you mention that term again, I will have to accuse you of contempt of court. The judge gave his final warning. Okay. Fong Bujua shrugged and walked toward the judge's seat. What are you doing? Poke stood up in alarm. Relax, Mr. Clerk. Fong Bujua casually took out something from his backpack. I'm just going to show you something. As he spoke, he handed a piece of paper to Poke. Please show it to His Honor. After handing over the document, Brother Jew turned around and used a provocative gaze to look at the poop-faced, or rather, at Biff. This document was personally given by the Count of Script, the book world's lawyer's certificate. Brother Jew's detective club is no doubt a legal territory in the main universe, and he himself is the legal government there. At this point, he licked his lips and made a face at Biff. The question that some people have about my lawyer qualification shouldn't be a problem anymore, right? The document is fine. The judge soon finished reading the document. Madman, he thought about it and changed his tone. Defense lawyer, this court admits that you have the right to represent Phantom Dawn. I say. Phantom Dawn placed his elbows on the table of the defendant's stand. He held his cheeks and put on an impatient expression. Is anyone listening to me or not? I've already said that I'm going to plead guilty, and I don't want that man to represent me. Defense lawyer, you heard him. Your client refuses to allow you to represent him. The judge turned to Brother Jew. I object, Fong Bujua replied. Hey, you have a right to object to that. Phantom Dawn was shocked. That's right. Defense lawyer, what are you objecting to? The judge was also confused. The defendant is a minor, so matters related to his defense should be decided by his legal representative. He has no right to reject my request, Fong Bujua replied. The judge thought about it. Is that so? He paused for half a second. Then, who is the defendant's legal representative? It's me. Fong Bujua patted his chest and admitted it without even thinking about it. What is your relationship with the defendant? The judge asked. I'm his godfather. Fong Bujua gave another harsh answer without even thinking about it. Bullsh asterisk T. Phantom Dawn turned around and cursed. Brother Jew heard that and continued to ignore Phantom Dawn. He looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, I have farted. Air. The judge said, So what? It's nothing. Since my client brought up, I thought I'd share it with everyone, Fong Bujua replied. Oh. The judge was silent for 3 seconds. Defense lawyer, please do not bring up things that have nothing to do with this case. Okay. Brother Jew nodded. In 3 sentences, Fong Bujua used the double meaning of the word bullsh asterisk T and the translation problem of the game to brush the matter aside. So, the judge continued. Defense lawyer and legal representative. You wish to plead not guilty for the defendant? Yes. Fong Bujua replied. And he turned to the jury. I hope the jury can ignore all of the defendant's testimony. This court allows you to make that request, the judge said immediately. Hey, how is that possible? Phantom Dawn was not familiar with the law, much less the court of truth, so it was understandable that he would be shocked. Enough. Fong Bujua finally sidled to the defendant's stand. He lowered his voice and whispered to Phantom Dawn. If you wish to escape, stand still and watch my performance. TSK. Phantom Dawn did not appreciate it. He also lowered his voice and replied, We are in a competition, and it should be a fight to the death. Even if I'm willing to cooperate with you to deal with these NPCs, don't you think it would be more efficient for us to fight directly? If we work together, we can indeed wash this place with blood. Fong Bujua replied, But that is meaningless. He lowered his voice even further. The Court of Truth is a unique 4-pillar gods. It does not have an independent physical entity like the other pillar gods. The Court of Truth is a concept, a consciousness. It is not something that can be destroyed with violence. Oh, Phantom Dawn added. Then what do you plan to do? Talk it to death? Umph. Brother Jew smiled, but did not say anything. Chapter 1083. This will be the last month's preview for 2015. I wanted to add a touch of seriousness to this text, to add a sense of melancholy. But I asked myself, are these the emotions I really want to express? Obviously not. At that moment, my heart was flowing with a light laziness and the decadence of procrastination. Reading this, I believe everyone understands that in the next 2 months, you will still be dominated by the horror of random updates. I will omit a series of long chuckles here. All right, after the usual shameless start, let's talk about something more serious. First, I have to thank everyone for their support for the physical book of Thriller Paradise. The first volume sold very well, and soon there was news of an additional print run. I was so flattered by everyone's enthusiasm that my hand shook, and I ended up signing many ugly signatures. Take my words seriously, laughing with arms akimbo. Based on my understanding, the second volume will be released in mid-December at the latest, and I hope everyone will continue to support me then. Starting from the second volume, every physical book of Thriller Paradise will come with a story of the second-rate detective and the cat. It is planned to be 2 stories per case. Of course, just like how Thriller Paradise is not a thriller. Even though the second-rate detective and the cat has the word detective in the title, it does not necessarily mean that it is a detective story. Instead of saying that the second is a detective story, it is more like a fantasy detective story written by Aoi Mitsuyoshi. When you read it, you'd better be mentally prepared. So now that we are done with the physical book, let's talk about the serialization. In the next 2 months, I will be busy with my daily life, and the time I have to write will indeed decrease. Besides, I still have to write too. The latter has a deadline. If I can't make it, the printing company won't wait for me. So, I don't know if I can finish Ragnarok in these 2 months, but I'm not sure if I can finish Ragnarok, but the general progress will not change. At the latest, the plot of S2 will come to an end after the Lunar New Year. Then, for the whole year of 2016, I will try my best to maintain full attendance and try my best to bring Thriller Paradise to an end by the end of the year. When you read the above sentence, please pay attention to the key words within the quotation marks. At this point, I can't help but think perhaps, at this time next year, everyone will have the contradictory feeling of wishing that I will not write too fast, because then it will be the day that I will have to say goodbye to Phone Bujue. In any case, who knows what will happen next year? Humans speculating about the future is like looking back after going to the toilet. You never know what you'll see shit in the future. Therefore, I wish that in the next month, every day, you will be able to fulfill a small wish. Even if you can sleep for 5 minutes, you can sleep for 2.5 hours, right? Please accept my 2.5 hours of goodwill. There's no need to be courteous with me. As for myself, I've already spent the last 2.5 hours writing this trailer. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.